We're good?
All
right. Good afternoon. This is Commission President Ryan Calkins convening the regular meeting of May 10th, 2022. The time is 12:06 p.m. We're meeting today here at the Pier 69 Commission chambers, as well as online through the Microsoft Teams platform. This is only our second meeting in this new hybrid meeting environment, and we appreciate your patience as we address technology adjustments along the way and settle into the new meeting format. Perfect example. You want to give me a heads up when we're good?
I'm not sure where that came from.
All right. Good afternoon. This is Commission President Ryan Calkins. I'm going to assume we're okay. Clerk Hart, can you please take the roll?
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Cho.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Felleman.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasagawa.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Mohammed.
Present.
Thank you. And Commissioner Calkins.
Present.
Thank you. You do have a quorum in attendance.
Due to the continued virtual component of participation for our meetings, we have staff, external presenters, and members of the public who may be participating on their personal devices or from their telephones today. We've made arrangements to accommodate this virtual format. Later, we'll take public comment from people who are participating by Teams as well as in person and have signed up to speak. For anyone participating on Microsoft Teams, please mute your speakers when not actively speaking or presenting. Please keep your camera off unless you're a member of the Commission or Executive Director participating remotely, or you are a member of staff in a presentation and are actively addressing the Commission. Members of the public addressing the Commission may turn on their cameras when their name is called to speak. For anyone at the dais here today, please turn off the speakers on any computers and silence your devices. When you are recognized to speak, you will press the button for your microphone to be audible, and you will press it again to silence it when you're not actively speaking. All of the items noted here will ensure a smoother meeting. Thank you very much for helping out with that. All votes today will be taken by the roll call method, since there is a virtual component to the meeting. So it is clear for everyone participating remotely how votes are cast. Commissioners will say aye or nay when their name is called. To be equitable, I ask that all commissioners wait to be recognized before speaking. We are meeting on the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish people, with whom we share a commitment to steward these natural resources for future generations. This meeting is being digitally recorded and may be viewed or heard at any time on the Port's website and may be rebroadcast by King County Television. Please stand or join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. All votes today will be taken by the roll call method.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
We are meeting on the ancestral lands and waters of the coast. The first item of business today is approval of the agenda. Are there any motions to rearrange the orders of the day or any items to remove from the consent agenda for separate discussion? Don't see any. Commissioners, the question is now on approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Is there any objection to the approval of the agenda as currently presented? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Our first order of business today is special orders of the day. Clerk Hart, can you please read the item into the record? We'll then hear from Executive Director Metric to introduce the item.
Yes, this is agenda item 4A, proclamation and recognition of May as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month.
Commissioners, as some of the fastest growing racial and ethnic groups in the nation, Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities represent a multitude of ethnicities, languages, and experiences that enrich America and strengthen our community. During May, we take time to honor, recognize, and celebrate the innumerable contributions, vibrant cultures, and rich heritage of Asian Americans and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. From serving our country in uniform, advocating for civil rights, starting new businesses, winning Olympic medals, the contributions of the Asian Americans and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities touch the lives of Americans every day. Our Home of Asians and Pacific Islanders Employee Resource Group, otherwise known as HAPPY Employee Resource Group, our Employee Resource Group is hosting two events with Commissioners Cho and Hasagawa on May 12th from 12 to 1 p.m. and on May 26th from 12 to 1 p.m. to celebrate the month and hear from commissioners about their experience as AAPI leaders. I look forward to being part of those events. So next, I'd like to turn over to Buxton, our Senior Director of the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, to lead us through the discussion of the proclamation. Buxton.
Thank you, Executive Director Metric, and good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Buxton Qaisar. I use she, her pronouns, and I identify as West Asian, born and raised in Iran. And I'm the Senior Director of the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and I'm honored to be here today, along with my port colleagues, to help read this proclamation recognizing Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and to be a part of an organization that makes time and space for such commemorations. The last few years have brought many challenges and difficulties for the members of this community. We've experienced an unthinkable rise in anti-Asian discrimination and racism, including physical violence, verbal attacks, disproportionate economic struggles in the community. It's widely thought that COVID brought all of this to the surface, and the port has done many things to respond, from messages of support to our communities, to training and education for our workforce, to solidarity events organized by our employee resource groups. One thing is clear: the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities are strong, organized, united, and resilient. Our communities make our region and our nation strong. Let us take a moment to honor, celebrate, and express gratitude for the innumerable contributions of the Asian, Pacific Islander, and Native Hawaiian communities. Today, I'm here along with my port colleagues and friends to read this proclamation. I'm here along with Brian Cow, Senior Port Budget Analyst, Janice Zahn, Assistant Engineering Director, and Brendalyn Tole, Senior Manager of Aviation Maintenance. And we are going to read the proclamation together, and I'll start. Let us take a moment to honor, celebrate, and express gratitude for the innumerable contributions. Proclamation of the Port of Seattle Commission. Whereas every May we celebrate the history, contributions, and achievements of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders across our nation and at the Port of Seattle. And whereas the annual Asian and Pacific American Heritage Week was first introduced by Congressman Norm Mineta and Frank Horton in 1977 and transformed over the following decades to a month-long celebration known as APA Heritage Month, which is officially designated in 1990 with the passing of the Public Law 101-287.
My name is Brian Cow. I'm a Chinese American from the island of Guam. Whereas, despite discrimination such as the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the Immigration Act of 1924, and exclusionary laws and practices that prevented access to naturalization, education, jobs, housing, and public services, each successive generation of AA and HPIs helped build our great nation's infrastructure and economy and defended our democracy in times of crisis. AA and HPIs have laid railroad tracks, tilled fields, started businesses, cared for our infirm, and served honorably in the military to protect our freedom. And whereas we celebrate the achievement of Vice President Kamala Harris, the first person of South Asian descent to hold the second highest office in the nation, and who is blazing a trail for AA and HPI communities and women in general, and that AA and HPI are part of the American fabric and higher aspirations are achievable. And whereas we also celebrate the achievements of our Port of Seattle Commissioners, Sam Cho and Toshiko Grace Hasegawa, who are of Asian ancestry, paving the way for future AA and HPI leaders. And whereas, despite many achievements, disparities still exist when Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities are disaggregated on a racial and ethnic basis. We must strive to disaggregate information in order to identify these disparities and work to close the equity gaps that continue to exist among AA and HPI communities. And
hi, I'm Janice Zahn. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as Chinese American. Whereas we recognize the valuable contributions and many sacrifices our diverse AA and HPI community members have made to our nation and to the Port of Seattle, as we remain cognizant of the continual struggles faced by our AA and HPI communities, such as an immigration system in need of comprehensive reform and systemic barriers to economic justice, health equity, educational attainment, personal safety, and glass ceilings in the workplace. And whereas AA and HPI communities have long histories in the Pacific Northwest and together make up the largest non-white group in King County, refuting the perception that we are perpetual foreigners. And whereas in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen an increase in anti-Asian sentiment and violent acts towards people of Asian descent, including elders. March 16 marked the one-year anniversary of the 2021 Atlanta SPAR shooting, where 6 Asian American women, 2 of Chinese descent and 4 of Korean descent, were targeted because of their ethnicity and together make up the largest non-white group in King County, refuting the perception
Brendelin,
that
you're muted.
You are muted.
we are perpetual foreigners. And whereas in the wake of the COVID-19
Good afternoon.
pandemic, we have seen an
My name is
increase
Brenda
in
Lynn
anti-Asian
Samasaila
sentiment
Vienna
and
Talile.
violent
My
acts
pronouns
towards
are
people
she,
of
her.
Asian
I am
descent,
Samoan,
including
born and raised on the beautiful island of American Samoa. I am Pacific Islander. Whereas the COVID-19 disparately impacted Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and Kofa Islander communities who experienced significantly higher incidence of contraction, hospitalization, and death, and experienced significant workplace discrimination. And whereas the recognition of May as Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is an important and meaningful step in honoring the history and contributions of AA and HPI people and port employees. Now, therefore, the Port of Seattle Commission hereby commemorates May as Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, acknowledges the contribution of the Home of Asian and Pacific Islander, also known as HAPPY, Port of Seattle Employee Resource Group, and commits to demonstrating an inclusive and welcoming environment for AA and HPI people and promoting racial equity.
Thank you, Bukta, Brian, Janice, and Brendelin for reading through that. And now we're going to turn to commissioners for comments, beginning with Commissioner Hasegawa and then followed by Cho, the 2 sponsors of this resolution.
Thank you, President Calkins. It brings me great pride to introduce today's proclamation honoring our diverse AA, NH, and PI communities as the first woman of Asian ancestry to serve upon this commission. I'd like to thank Bukta, Brian, Janice, and Brenda Lynn for this thoughtful reading of the ANHPI Heritage Month proclamation. I'd also like to thank Commission staff, the Home of Asian Pacific Islander Happy Port Employer Resource Group, and the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Office in preparing this beautifully written proclamation. I have the honor of serving in another capacity as Executive Director of Washington State's Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs, where I have the privilege and joy of working intimately with our diverse communities statewide. Together, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders represent the second largest and the fastest growing minority population in our state. Most recent data shows that we now make up 11% of the state's overall population. And at the same time, our community is very complex and diverse. Our communities represent over 42 different nations across the world, and we speak over 100 languages in over 1,000 different dialects. As a port commissioner, I'm also mindful that the Port of Seattle itself serves as the primary point of entry into our region for people from across the world, and that our top five trade partners are based in Asia. It is exactly our diversity that makes our economy resilient and makes our social fabric strong. And as we celebrate ANHPI Heritage Month, we celebrate the many contributions of our communities to this port, to this region, and to our nation. We also acknowledge the significant work that we have to do on an ongoing basis to empower and uplift all of our communities, for we are not monolithic. And we have to, including here at the Port of Seattle, improve our practices, including tracking data disaggregated on an ethnic basis to close the equity gap and advance achievement outcomes. And I also want to share my gratitude with Happy, our Port ERG. I love your ERG name for their leadership to work to host 2 internal events in celebration this month. May 12th will be an opportunity for Commissioner Cho and I later this week to connect with our broader port community and hosted by Happy. And May 26th will be a discussion with the ANHPI community in solidarity. So I'd like to thank Andrew Ko, Norman Melendres, Esther Swan Chu, and Peter Cho, as well as Jody Lei and Kantang Tavangsak for stepping up on behalf of the community members. I really look forward to these events and continuing the celebration with everyone throughout the month of May. In closing, thank you to our executive leadership. And I'd also like to acknowledge the passing of the founder of ANHPI Heritage Week, which was later evolved in following decades into a month-long celebration that we recognize today, Secretary Norm Mineta, who was a trailblazer for so many of us and a champion for civil rights. We honor your legacy, and it's our duty to carry it forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Cho.
Thank you so much, President Calkins and Commissioner Hasegawa. You know, I know that we celebrate this every month, but I feel like the sentiment of celebrating our heritage, our diversity, and the contributions of APIs to this country never wanes. And it feels just as impactful every year. I think Commissioner Hasegawa has done a terrific job of kind of summarizing the sentiments and all the thanks. I also want to thank Buxton, the Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, Janice, Brenda Brian, for their reading of today's proclamation, and to the Happy ERG for all that you do on behalf of the Port of Seattle and the employees of the port. But if I may, I want to take this moment and point of privilege to talk a little bit about a mentor of mine who we lost last week. And that's Secretary Norm Mineta. And I've had the distinct honor and pleasure and privilege of knowing Norm personally as a mentor of mine from the very beginning of my career when I was a young staffer on Capitol Hill. And for those of you or anyone who don't know the history or the story behind Norm Mineta, this is a second-generation Japanese American who, as a child, was imprisoned during World War II simply for having Japanese American or Japanese ancestry. This experience inevitably shaped Norm in so many ways. In fact, he would often tell me and advise to his mentees that there's only 2 things in life you really truly own. The first thing is your name, and the second one is your integrity. And he would always say that whether you're in public office or a professional in other ways, those are the 2 things you should always protect. And his philosophy came from his experience of being stripped of all his belongings and being sent to prison. Fast forward 50-some years later, September 11th, 2001, the Taliban attack the United States, the Twin Towers come down, and it was Secretary Norm Mineta of the Department of Transportation who issued the order to land all planes, as all the airlines remember. But what's often forgotten is actually 10 days later, Norm issued a policy and a letter to every airline in the country that reminded them that it was illegal to racially profile, that airlines were not allowed to impose higher security protocols on anyone of Muslim or Arabic heritage. And that was very clearly a result of his experience as a Japanese American, having been profiled and imprisoned for his race and his ancestry. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that we often say, as people of colors, as leaders, that representation matters. And Norm Mineta, in his position as Secretary of Transportation, was literally the embodiment of why representation matters. Oftentimes, I think to myself, if it wasn't Norm, and if it was someone else sitting in that seat in the Situation Room, making those decisions at the table, how different the policies coming out of the Bush administration could have been. And so Norm's life history is a testament to why we need to have continued representation in all levels of government, including on the local level. When Norm was in Congress, he founded what's now called the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies. He was also the founder of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. And he founded that because he's noticed that all the other ethnic minorities in Congress were getting meetings and an audience with the president when the Asian Americans were not. And Apex, as we call it, started a fellowship program called the Congressional Fellowship. And I was a fresh grad out of grad school when I applied for this fellowship and got my start working on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And that's all thanks to the fact that Norm was the founder of the organization and the program. And so I think it's safe to say that I would not be sitting here today had it not been for Norm and all the work that he has done. I'll close by saying this, that, I ran for the Port of Seattle at the age of 29, and people often ask, how did you win? How did you get here? How are you so far ahead at such a young age? And to me, the answer is so simple. It's because of guys like Norm. It's because I stand on the shoulders of guys who came before me. He showed me the way. He told me how to get it done. And it's the reason why I stand here today and why countless generations of AAPIs will be able to run for office, become leaders, because of the work that Norm did. People also ask me, what's next? What are you running for next? And, you have such a long runway ahead of you. And even to that question, I know exactly how Norm would advise me. He would say, don't look so far ahead that you trip on something right in front of you. He was filled with tremendous wisdom. He's going to be tremendously missed, but I hope he's resting in peace, knowing that there is an army of his pupils who will carry out his legacy. So thank you.
That was extraordinary history, Commissioner Cho. Thank you so much. Are there any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Mohammed.
That was really powerful. This proclamation is extremely powerful. Thank you to everyone who worked on the proclamation. Thank you to Commissioner Cho and Commissioner Hasegawa for your leadership in the AANPI community and for your solidarity in our community at large. We honor the diverse culture and the important contributions of the AANHPI community that have played such a critical role in our region, in our history and development. Our region is home to so many different AA and HPI community that continue to help our region and port expand, grow, and thrive. We celebrate the achievements of our AA and HPI community. While we celebrate, we also must not forget the longstanding discrimination and attacks the community has faced within the past few years. Now more than ever, we need to stand with our AAHPI community and continue to combat the surge of hate crimes against them. It is also critical that we continue to invest in our AANHPI community. That means investing on our workforce, language access programs, and supporting our small businesses through grants and funding. For instance, the Little Saigon community that I just toured yesterday. that has been hit so hard by this pandemic. As a commissioner, I'm proud to stand in solidarity with the community and commit to supporting them every step of the way. We are so lucky to have so many AANHPI leaders at our port, including our very own commissioners, Commissioner Hasegawa and Commissioner Cho. Thank you for your leadership. It is also critical that we continue to
Any further commissioner comments? Commissioner Fellman.
Really briefly, I'd like to express my great gratitude for both Commissioner Cho and Hasegawa for bringing this forward, and staff for making this all possible. And it's really a great honor to be able to serve with you and bringing forth your contributions. I want to just reflect on one other great Asian American person, which was Senator Inouye, who I had the pleasure of having some working with. One of the things that I always, he was sometimes called the third senator to Washington State. He was really a phenomenal asset. And especially with Native American tribes who I worked a lot with. And so he was, trying to get sovereignty to Native Hawaiians, and so understood intrinsically the importance of Native rights in Washington State. But one thing that I've always appreciated and will ever always remember is that he would host an event in Seattle. I went through several times with survivors of the internment camps, and they were always old women, because most of the guys had died by then. But it was just remarkable to see this the proudness and the integrity of these elder women, and standing up and representing this atrocity that they were exposed to. And also kind of was a bonding feeling for me, as being from Russian and Polish, Russian and German Jewish descent. So it was a great affinity that I had for Senator Inouye, for both his relationship with tribes and with folks that were unjustly detained. So thank you again for bringing this all forward, and I'll leave it to that.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman. The only remarks I would add is to reflect on how important it is for an institution like the Port of Seattle, that is both the entryway for many of the people to whom the ancestry that are NHPI colleagues and neighbors and community members came through initially, and also that we continue to serve as a doorway and as a means of connecting back to the places from which our neighbors and community members came from. So I think it's especially poignant for us to be marking that this month. And with that, I'm going to ask for.
Can I make a real quick comment? I know I've talked about Norm a lot, but speaking to your comments about us being a gateway, I think the Port of Seattle staff and those listening might be interested to know that we have the Port of Seattle specifically has a very special connection to Norm. His father, when he immigrated to the United States, actually immigrated from Japan through the Port of Seattle. Yeah, and obviously they didn't have planes back then, but he came here on a steamship into our harbors, and that's how their family got their start in the United States. So it really is full circle for us. And can you imagine if the Port of Seattle didn't exist, or if we weren't a welcoming port, how history would have been different? So I thought maybe the folks at the port might be interested to know the connection we have to the Menendez family.
There's one other thing. Today is the opening of the IAF officially. Right. So it's just so happens to be a moment of great welcoming to our Asian Pacific people across the oceans and everything.
Hearing no further comments for this item, is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. President.
And a second?
I'll second.
All right, the motion was made and seconded. Clerk Hart, can you please call the roll for the vote? Commissioners, please say aye or nay when your name is called.
For the vote, beginning with Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasegawa.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Cho.
Yay.
Thank you, Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you. There are 5 yeses, 5 yeas and 0 nays for this item.
And with that, the motion passes. Thank you so much. Next on our agenda is the Executive Director's Report. Executive Director Metric.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Before we start, I want to thank all Commissioners for your time and participation in this morning's study session focusing on advancing our crew's environmental strategy. I appreciated your great questions and feedback about how we work together to reduce environmental impacts, increase community benefits. Thank you for helping us plot the way forward. I want to begin by making note of a very important milestone for the port today, which Commissioner Filliman already mentioned, and that's the official full opening of our new International Arrivals Facility at SEA. The IAF has been operating at limited capacity since our soft opening on April 19th, and today marks the official transition from our old federal inspection services in the South Satellite to our new, larger, brighter FIS in the IAF. How's that for acronyms? The old South Satellite FIS was put into service in 1973, and of course it showed its age in that, and is 49 years old this year. It is long past to retire it and provide the kind of outstanding travel experience our passengers deserve. The IAF now provides a memorable experience for those arriving international travelers. I want to congratulate our IAF project team, led by our Chief Operating Officer, Dave Soike, our builder, Clark Construction, our partners at TSA and CBP, and our many subcontractors and construction trades, as well as our architect, SOM, and the entire aviation team, but especially our operations, security, and ORAT teams for getting us to this point we've been anticipating for so long. Commissioners, regarding COVID, which my regular updates usually include a COVID update, Seattle-King County has announced that it is transitioning away from its emergency response to the virus to a long-term COVID prevention management plan with continued focus on communities most impacted. This transition includes the closure of several drive-through and walk-up testing sites within the county and reallocating its resources to higher-risk communities. The long-term COVID prevention management plan for individuals, including Port of Seattle employees, stakeholders, and customers, continues to include being up to date on COVID vaccine and the recommended booster doses, improving indoor air quality through ventilation, filtration, and other strategies like opening windows and entertaining friends and family outdoors, using a quality and well-fitting mask when in crowded indoor settings. I'm demonstrating that. And getting tested and isolate when you have symptoms of illness, no matter how minor the symptoms appear. Just a reminder to test yourself before participating in large gatherings of high-risk people or other family gatherings. Commissioners, I'd like to also acknowledge that May 11th through 17th is National Police Week. I'm grateful to our Port of Seattle Police Department for all they do to keep our aviation and maritime gateways safe and secure. You'll hear more about the wide range and scope of their operations, as well as a brief status on the update of implementation of our assessment recommendations during their annual Port of Seattle Police Department report out scheduled for June 28th, the June 28th Commission meeting. This recognition of National Police Week is a fitting occasion to highlight an example of an outstanding work by a member of the Port of Seattle Police Force. I often say that our officers interact with people in our facilities when they're having a really bad day. And I think this is a great example of how our professionals respond in those instances. Last week, our police responded to a report of a passenger in distress at Sea-Tac Airport. We learned the passenger was distraught over personal issues and was traveling alone to Dallas. His behavior was disturbing, and the airline would not allow him to board his flight. But Officer Michelle Bregel, our crisis care coordinator, stepped in to help calm the passenger and intercede on his behalf. She assisted him in making arrangements for another flight and contacted his East Coast relatives. She also personally worked with the airline representatives to get him safely on board another flight. After her sister-in-law wrote in an email that Officer Bregel was professional, kind, and everything he needed in that moment when he was alone and lost in the world, I wholeheartedly believe that officer saved my brother-in-law's life last night. This email from the family member is a tremendous tribute to Officer Bregel, and we thank her for her empathy, professionalism, and service. And it's just an example of what I know Acting Chief Thea was in the room here with us today, of just him and all the officers and everybody that works for him, what they do day in and day out. So I think it's great to recognize them and thank them. After sister-in-law wrote an email, I also want to take a moment to thank everyone who planned for and participated in events around the port marking Public Service Recognition Week last week. I was delighted to see all the fun photos posted in the shared galleries, to hear about the positive stories and interactions from the various site visits by port executives throughout the week. And I really want to recognize my members of the executive leadership team that met off hours around the clock, because the port is a 24/7 operation, but try to go out and show appreciation for everyone throughout the port that works in delivering the missions for us. As you've heard me say before, I believe public service is a calling, and it's great that we take time to recognize our colleagues throughout the port that are motivated by making the lives of those in our community better through our operations and programs. Moving to today's commission meeting, I'd like to highlight a few items. We have a relatively short agenda today. On a consent agenda, I'd like to highlight item 8E, which supports our overall efforts to improve the environment and be good stewards of our assets through the removal of creosote pilings at Shilshole Bay Marina. Under new business, we have two resolutions related to surplus property, one in our maritime portfolio and another as part of our aviation portfolio. Following these discussions is an action related to Concourse A at SEA and a closeout report on our Green Cities partnership. Commissioners, that concludes my remarks for today.
Thank you, Executive Director Metric. With that, we're going to turn to Ms. Chung for our committee reports.
Good afternoon, President Calkins, Commissioners. We have 3 committee reports today. The Waterfront Industrial Lands Committee co-chairs Fellman and Hasegawa and port staff met with leadership from the Seattle Aquarium on April 27th to discuss the opportunities for the port and the aquarium to collaborate on matters of common interest. A key area of focus is a port-sponsored exhibit in the forthcoming Ocean Pavilion, which is currently under construction between the existing aquarium and the Pike Place Market. The committee expects to have a final report for the exhibit, as well as a list of other potential opportunities for the port and the aquarium to collaborate, completed by July of this year. Commissioners Cho and Mohammed attended the Aviation Committee meeting on April 29th and discussed 3 topics: the Flight Corridor Safety Program, the Taxi Pilot Program, and an update on the International Arrival Facility opening. The Flight Corridor is completing the first phase of the FAA mandated regulatory program and looking ahead to the next phase. Proposed next steps for the program are expected to be presented to the Commission in June. The Taxi Pilot Program expires on September 30th. Discussion outlined the history of the pilot and a proposed path forward. Commissioners Mohammed and Cho convened the Equity and Workforce Development Committee on Friday, April 29th to discuss 2 agenda items: the Workforce Development Annual Report and an update on the port's apprenticeship and priority hire efforts. The full Commission will receive a brief on both of these topics during the May 24th Commission meeting. During the Workforce Development presentation, Commissioner Mohammed highlighted a need to raise awareness of resources available to airport workers, including Airport University. Staff responded that our new contract with Airport Jobs will allow us to do more career pathways development among airport workers. Commissioner Mohammed also expressed a desire to determine why the Airport University program is undersubscribed before approving additional funding. Commissioner Cho seconded this point. Commissioner Cho asked for staff to include an analysis of the port's priority hire goals and results relative to other local municipalities in the presentation for the full Commission. Staff agreed to develop this analysis, and it will be included in the May 24th presentation. This concludes my report. Thank you. Staff responded that our new contract with Airport Jobs will allow us to do more career pathways development among airport workers. Commissioner Mohammed also expressed a desire to determine why the Airport University program is undersubscribed before approving additional funding. Commissioner Cho seconded this point.
That should be better. Written materials provided to the clerk will be included in today's meeting record. The clerk has a list of those prepared to speak. We are taking comments from anyone who has joined us, who has signed up to speak virtually, as well as from anyone who has joined us in the chambers. As the clerk calls your name, if you are joining remotely, please unmute yourself, then please repeat your name for the record. If you're on the Teams meeting and are also streaming the meeting on the website, please mute the website stream to avoid feedback. Comment time will be limited to 2 minutes per person. Clerk Hart, can you please call the first speaker?
Yes, thank you. Give me 1 moment here. I'll get the timer up. And our first speaker is Traci Buxton.
Hi, I'm Traci Buxton, Deputy Mayor in the City of Des Moines, and thank you for allowing us to come and give public comment today. I'm here to talk about the ACE grants and the partnership that was created. It was the Green Cities Partnership. I have my manual right here that we're kind of affectionately call our Urban Canopy Master Plan, a fabulous document that was created through the partnership. The ACE grants, then Forterra came and was able to create this manual for our cities. And so thanking the port for this opportunity, Forterra for their research and this resource and this, it was an inventory of our urban canopies that also included a plan for moving forward in creating creating and rescuing and sustaining our urban canopies in this airport cities area. So there was a lot of community participation. I was involved in several events, reclaiming some area, planting trees. It was we've got some great park stewards now. It was a fabulous community experience, and now we have this resource for future work. So just want to offer a lot of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Buxton. Next speaker, please.
Yes, our next speaker is J.C. Harris.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I was very impressed by the study session this morning, and the questions were fantastic. And I wish anyone who is involved in the airport would watch those sessions. I mentioned to Commissioner Fellman like 5 years ago something, I used the word scotoma. It means a blind spot you're not aware of. The Commission really digs in, I've noticed, on marine issues in a way that the airport, it just doesn't get the attention. I am here today to ask you to consider North Sea-Tac Park. My colleague, Deputy Mayor Buxton, mentions the tree canopy around the airport in general is struggling, and that park was part of a commitment that the port made going back to 1973. And it's unfortunate that I can't find on your own website a full copy of the Sea-Tac community plan, which I would love to donate to the port. The port was at the forefront of creating noise buffers for the community, and that park was an intrinsic portion of that plan. You guys were at the forefront of all airports, and I hope you will take that into consideration as you think about the SAMP. Please set aside that land in perpetuity for the purpose the port intended it to be in 1976. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Next speaker.
Yes, we're going to go ahead and take a couple from the room now. We'll start with Marguerite Richard.
And I hope you will take that into consideration as you think about
Good day, everyone. I'm Marguerite Richard, born and raised in Seattle. Thank you for the history, Ms. Hasakawa, because the last time I saw you, I don't even know if you moved forward on anything that I said. And it's really interesting that I'm here today because I bounce around a lot because I deal with a whole lot of issues here in Seattle. When they told the history about Asian Americans, my uncle had a record store back in the 60s on Jackson Street, known as Chinatown. It wasn't Chinatown International. It was Chinatown to us. And he brought jazz to this city. And so I sat there and I tried to stomach everything. And then I was told that my aunt's first job was with the Port of Seattle. You want to know his name? Bob Summarize. Look him up. But I have some righteous indignation right now. See, because I was over in Bellevue. They gave the history also about the police over there. And I have been known to be involved in the consent decree. And I have been known to be out front when I see our black blood still being splattered on the streets for no reason. Now, I'm saying that there are such things as criminals that do criminal stuff. But when you just get pointed out for the color of your skin, that's a whole nother ball game. You never talk about that, but you talk about what the police is supposed to do, protect and serve. Huh? And so we're still trying to get up out of this cuss of unrighteousness that seems to come to our doorstep and our front door. And I should be doing something else, really. But because my aunt was a part of Resurrection City, the Poor People's Campaign on Washington, she kind of left this here for me to carry on.
Ms. Richard, please conclude.
Good day.
Thank you very much, Ms. Richard. Next speaker, Clerk.
Yes, our next speaker is Alex Zimmerman.
And so we're still trying to get up out of this cuss of unrighteousness that seems to come to our doorstep and our front door. And I should be doing something else.
Sie Heil, my damn Nazi fascist mob bandita. My name is Alex Zimmerman, and I want to speak about something what is absolutely for me important, and I live here 35 plus years. I see something about total racism, something about not equally. To me, it looks like 100% BS. In my big Jewish nose, you know what it means, go bigger and bigger. What has happened right now for the last 2 years? This how Democrat mafia want to destroy a fundamental American principle, mid-class, motivate a poor people, motivate minority, go against these people. It's not about race. It's about elite who want control America. It's happened for the last 2 years. Totally concentration camp. Ever Hitler and Stalin don't do this so fast, like this Democrat for the last 2 years. Unique situation, no analogy in new human history. It's exactly what I want to speak to you guys. It's a very important point. And I give you a couple examples about racism, what is we have. We're not equal. 5 consul for Seattle for last 5 years is a minority. It's a Mexican Latina. What's happened with Seattle right now? Total collapse. They cannot qualify for the job because
Mr. Zimmerman, public comment at port meetings is about port business.
No, you're talking about this. So this another point. What is you supposed to be doing by your standard because you care only about your chair. You not care about nothing. What's happened in America for the last 2 years. When you interrupt, you're supposed to be giving me back money. So I give you a classic example. School board, 6 women, minority, yes. So what's happened right now, what is he talking about? Equal protection and everything is a pure racism. Is this exactly what has happened? Is this exactly what is we need stopping? Sie Heil, my Führer. Thank you very much.
Next speaker.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jordan Van Vost.
Sorry, I had to listen to that. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Jordan Van Vost. The Port of Seattle's cruise. Can you hear me? Hello?
Go ahead, Jordan.
The Port of Seattle's cruise ship business has a massive carbon footprint when one actually counts the flight miles and ship emissions outside our airshed. That's not going to significantly change in the next decade with shore power, kelp forests, or solar panels, alternative fuels. The climate emergency is here now, and we have a responsibility to act. A Tibetan monk friend living in India wrote to me a few days ago about the impact of the record heat wave there. Dear Jordan-La, Tashidale, the hot weather is creating huge problems. Many monks have contracted dengue fever, and also the heat makes it difficult to attend class or study. Older monks cannot go outside. I get headaches very often. Wells are running dry, and water must be delivered in tanker trucks from the river. If the monsoon rains don't come soon, we will face huge problems due to water shortage. I think these warning signs tell us we must take better care of this earth. I hope you can speak to the elected officials and make them aware of the climate problems we are experiencing now. With love and prayers, Lobsang Tashi. India and Pakistan have been in the grips of record heat for the last month, and it is about to get worse. Crop failures, water shortages, heat-induced illnesses, and death are all increasing. This heat wave is definitely unprecedented, said Dr. Chandni Singh, IPCC lead author and senior researcher at the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. This is what climate experts predicted, and it will have cascading impacts on health. How can we justify the huge carbon footprint of the non-essential cruise industry promoted by the port when South Asia and many other places in the world are becoming unlivable now due to a climate emergency which is principally caused by the lifestyles in the global north and the failure of our leaders to end business as usual? Where is the equity in that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Vost. Next speaker.
Yes, our next speaker is Marcy Keever.
Thank you. My name is Marcy Keever. I direct the Oceans and Vessels program at Friends of the Earth. I'm here today to reiterate our concerns about cruise ship exhaust gas scrubber wastewater discharges into Puget Sound and the lack of independent oversight in the Northwest with the defunding of the Alaska Ocean Ranger program. We appreciate the port's ban of the discharge of cruise scrubber wastewater at the dock and its work to achieve a pause in scrubber discharges last year when the cruise industry refused to agree to a ban as a part of the cruise MOU. We all know scrubber wastewater is incredibly harmful to the marine environment and the marine creatures that inhabit it. We all know how endangered our orcas are. Our orcas are incredibly stressed and hungry, and cruise industry pollution is only making matters worse. We've shared our specific concerns by email regarding previous cruise industry funded studies on scrubber wastewater and the lack of quality data inserted into those studies, leading them to be rejected by the likes of the International Maritime Organization. We encourage the Commission and port staff to ensure that the data that is behind the scrubber study is as independent and high quality as the study itself. Carnival Corporation was just released from a 5-year federal criminal probation where they were prosecuted for illegally discharging oily waste since at least 2005. During their federal probation, they were fined a total of $61 million and continued to commit thousands of environmental violations while on probation, including in Washington waters. The only reason we know about those violations was because of the independent court-ordered monitor that was appointed to keep track of the company while it was still on probation. We are incredibly concerned that there's almost zero independent oversight of the industry in the Northwest moving forward, whether from ocean rangers or the court-appointed monitor for Carnival. The Coast Guard and Ecology do a good job when they do announced inspections and the spot checks that are available to them with their broad mandate. But Carnival was caught by a whistleblower, not a regulator. Without that whistleblower, Carnival ships would likely still be polluting in violation of state, federal, and international law. Please move forward with these concerns in mind as the scrubber study is completed and the industry continues to grow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Keever. Clerk Hart, next speaker.
Our next speaker is Iris Antman.
We are incredibly concerned that there's almost zero independent oversight of the industry in the Northwest, whether from ocean rangers.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Iris Antman, and I'm with Seattle Cruise Control. During the study session this morning, it was reiterated by Commissioner Hawkins and agreed to by other commissioners that even if cruise in Seattle ended tomorrow, it would only go elsewhere. That may be true, but detrimental activities by others don't condone those same actions committed here. The goal of zero emissions by 2050 is a worthy goal, but its operationalization flies in the face of the increasing numbers of cruise sailings and air flights into and out of Seattle. Cruise ships use dirty bunker fuels, airplanes use fossil fuels. So how are we going to get to zero emissions by 2050 if we increase these health and climate destroying activities? Well, it may be true that cruise represents only 18% of maritime emissions versus the 70% from cargo shipping. Those numbers don't factor in the air miles, garbage and sewage of 5,000 passengers and 1,500 crew on a cruise ship versus the 0 passengers and 20 or 30 crew on a freighter. Seattle Cruise Control is asking for a transition to a cruise-free sailor sea. The scientists are telling us we need to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, not in 10 or 20 years or by 2050, but now. Cruising is a non-essential luxury pastime engaged in by people with means to the detriment of the masses of people who are struggling just to survive. As port commissioners, you hold the power to set a courageous example of climate leadership for others to follow. Be the greenest port. Life on Earth is not a zero-sum game. We will all lose everything if we keep procrastinating on addressing the unfolding drastic consequences of extractive and exploitative industries, which are essential for cruising to continue. And until we have environmentally friendly fuels, cruising will be emblematic of our out-of-touch connection with life and health. I have two more sentences, please. Until we have real sustainable fuels, cruising will be emblematic of our out-of-touch connection with life and health. It's time to downsize our consumer lifestyles. We are asking for a paradigm shift, not for tweaking around the edges, but rather for making big changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Antman. Next speaker, Clerk Hart.
Yes, our next speaker is Cynthia Spees.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Spees, an independent security researcher and Seattle resident. On April 9th, I participated in Sea-Tac's airport's new International Arrivals Facility, or IAF, passenger flow simulation, and was shocked to see zero signage regarding the collection of biometric data from travelers in the simplified arrivals area. Even worse is when I asked about the lack of signage, port staff at the simulation tried to wash their hands of it by saying the port has no control and that the port can't change federal law. This is incorrect because the port does have control, and exercising that control doesn't require any change to federal law. Specifically, no law prohibits a port from posting lawful and factual signage on port property. Moreover, the CBP SCA IAF standard operating procedure states that the port director determines the extent of CBP security areas. Bear in mind that no federal law requires CBP to collect biometric data of U.S. citizens. All the laws cited by CBP and regurgitated by the port in the past are only applicable to non-U.S. persons. Given that a large percentage of international travelers through SCA are U.S. citizens, this means the biometric data collection in the new IAF is a truly egregious violation of people's rights. Additionally, the port's executive policy on federal collection of biometric data specifies that the port would create guidelines for avoiding unintended image capture, which would include, for example, quote, by positioning the camera in a direction that does not face the main passenger area, use of a screen behind the individual being photographed, or use of a camera with a minimal field of view, end quote. However, there were no opaque screens behind where people are photographed, and the cameras encircle on three sides the entirety of the waiting line, meaning that unintended image capture is guaranteed by design. The IAF biometric data collection is without any form of consent, and the only way to opt out is to wear a ski mask, which I'm sure you would agree is not likely to go well for that traveler. This is absurd. The port is not being gagged by CBP. If you do nothing, then you are culpable. Post the signage, commissioners, even if you personally have to do it yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spees. Next speaker.
Yes, I actually missed a speaker, so going back to Byron, and Byron, please correct my pronunciation. Fahave.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Byron Piwave. I am the General Manager of Cedarbrook Lodge, and I'm speaking in support of the upcoming Alaska cruise seasons. The tourism and the hospitality industry, as you all know, has been disproportionately affected by the prolonged global COVID-19 pandemic. This was certainly seen within the cruise industry itself, our hotels, our restaurants, as well as your team members and their families. But now we believe there's an opportunity to capitalize on the leisure market that is out there, specifically in Seattle. People are gearing up to take advantage of their unused personal time off. And Seattle may not be the preferred destination for people interested in vacations by the ocean, but it is certainly a location that is rich with adventure and the beautiful outdoors. So two things people are now craving more than ever after being in quarantine in their homes for nearly 2 years. Therefore, I cannot stress the importance of cruise ships and the many thousands of hotel guests who comes to experience the Pacific Northwest before and after their cruise season. In 2019, during the cruise season months, the hotel experienced around a 90% occupancy, and that allowed us to employ about 179 team members. This was seriously effective in obviously in 2019 and 2021 with the restrictions in cruises, which we dropped our occupancy more than 30%, and we were only able to employ 68 team members. That's a 60% decrease from 2019. Thank you, commissioners, for your role in driving positive economic impact in this region, especially in the coming seasons, as we strive to maintain our hotels and restaurants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pihuave. Next speaker, Clerk Hart.
Yes, our next speaker is Stacy Oakes.
This was seriously effective in obviously in 2019 and 2021.
Stacy, if you're on the telephone, it's *6 to unmute.
Good morning. My name is Stacy Oakes, and I want to thank the Port of Seattle for having a study session on cruise ships this morning, with a special thank you to the commissioners who took the opportunity to ask questions about what else could be done to decrease the harmful impacts of the industry, such as creating a community advisory group, supporting the Alaska Rangers program, drafting specific benchmarks for how to get to zero emissions vessels, attaching stronger measures to tariffs and lease agreements, and including cruise worker conditions and human trafficking concerns in future cruise discussions. I also need to take this opportunity to point out some of the harmful logic and incompatible answers that are currently part of the backbone being used to justify supporting the cruise industry in Seattle. The notion that we need the money from cruise to support other sustainability efforts has a painful similarity to the way our state ties school funding to the destruction of our forests for the logging industry. We're cutting down our own lungs, our children's lungs, instead of doing the work to find truly sustainable ways to fund education and bolster the political will needed to change a long-entrenched industry. Several commissioners have repeatedly shared the idea that we're staying engaged in cruise so we can fix it from the inside, be a leader in driving better practices, and if we sent crews away, they would just go somewhere else, worse than Seattle, the greenest port in North America. Yet when pressed about what we can do with tariffs and lease agreements, enforcement tools, Scope 3 emissions, removing bad actors, the answers suddenly shift to the stance that we're just one port. It's an international issue. Cruise partners could just leave if new terms are too strict. This feels like double talk, and that makes it hard to believe any of the arguments. If Seattle didn't renew cruise agreements, would the ships really just go to Vancouver, which is already full and incapable of accommodating the largest ships? Or would the temporary lack of a port perhaps become permanent, like the cancellation of plans to build a third cruise terminal in Seattle, thus creating an actual reduction in an industry that is way too harmful to support in its current state? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oakes. Clerk Hart, next speaker.
Yes, our next speaker is Donald Brown.
It's an international issue. Cruise partners could just leave.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. I'm Donald Brown, Vice President of Policy with Cruise Lines International Association. CLIA is the unified voice of the cruise industry globally. Many of our cruise line members operate from or call on the Port of Seattle. Environmental stewardship is not only the right thing to do, it is an operational imperative for the cruise industry. We are highly regulated at the international, national, and local levels. Beyond compliance, CLIA members go above and beyond through implementation of the CLIA Global Waste Management Policy, which is a condition of membership. The industry's environmental commitment and leadership is strong. Each year, we publish an inventory of environmental technologies and practices, which demonstrates the industry's commitment and investment in sustainable technologies and operations. This data shows that despite only 14 ports worldwide with shoreside electricity capacity at least one berth, 35% of global cruise capacity is currently served by shoreside electricity, 22% more is being retrofitted, and 82% of new ships on order will be fitted with shoreside electricity capability. CLIA is actively engaged in the International Maritime Organization for the development of international regulations to protect the marine environment. This work is ongoing, but includes proposals for an International Maritime Research and Development Board to raise $5 billion over 10 years to accelerate development of zero carbon fuels and propulsion technologies. CLIA, in consultation with cruise line members, have recently announced our global directional vision to pursue net carbon zero cruising globally by 2050. to join the Global Maritime Forum call to action for shipping decarbonization. And for all ships calling at SFE, shoreside electricity-capable ports, to be equipped by 2035 or use alternative low-carbon technologies. I see my I will cut short, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide an update here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, and a reminder, we meet a couple of times a month, so if there's more you want to share, you're welcome back at public comment too. Next speaker.
Yes, our next speaker is Casey Stanley.
Good afternoon. My name is Casey Stanley, and I'm the Interim Deputy Director for the City of Burien Parks and Recreation and Cultural Services. The City of Burien would like to thank the Port of Seattle for providing resource support to benefit and improve our urban forest. With this support, Forterra was able to provide outreach to the Burien community through meetings and surveys. With the information gathered, an urban forest stewardship guide was drafted and adopted by the Burien City Council in October of 2020. This guide helped Burien set canopy cover increase goals. The trees in Burien support healthy air quality, specifically in neighborhoods closer and under our flight path. The Urban Forest Stewardship Guide is a tool used to guide volunteers and crew work. This guide also provides a tool for staff and community to see where the lack of trees and healthy urban forests was impacting our most vulnerable neighborhoods. With the end of funding and the contract with Forterra, the Green Burien Partnership is now supported internally. The challenge in this is that our budgets have not increased, though service has. In an effort to migrate this, Burien has applied for and supported partners and grant opportunities, outside funding sources, including a 20-hour position and stipend funding from King County Conservation District. Additionally, through the South King County Fund, several new and ongoing projects have been funded in Burien. This funding will allow for 1 to 3 year investment in parks we currently don't have the funding to support. We look forward to continuing our partnership with the Port of Seattle, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stanley. Next speaker.
Yes, our next speaker is Andrea O'Farrell.
Hello.
Hello.
I am fed up with what I feel is the pathological view that because of the economy, jobs, we are continuing with practices we know cause harm. Here, the port is celebrating cruise season, and I'm feeling aggrieved. From the French, make heavier, distressed. The latest IPCC report clearly states that we must stop burning fossil fuels now to even have the slimmest chance of keeping warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Cruise ships burn their dirtiest fossil fuels. And for what? A cheap, convenient vacation. I see mass extinction and human suffering on one hand, and a cruise vacation on the other. Not only do cruise ships burn fossil fuels, but thousands of people fly in from all across the country and the world. They're drawn here by a good time on a floating city, harming the very things they're coming to see. Orca, salmon, wildlife in the beautiful Salish Sea. Harming with cruise noise pollution, with toxic emissions, and of course, let's add the emissions of all those planes that got them here. And what's so good about cruises? The economic benefits are highly inflated, workers make low wages, work long hours, lack labor law protections, and the ships serve as petri dishes for infections. Sounds delightful. The Port of Seattle wants to be the greenest port in North America, while significantly increasing the number of environmentally unfriendly cruises to almost 300 this year, up from 200 in 2019. My mind is boggled by the insanity that we're living in. While we should be curtailing energy use and environmentally harmful activities, we have this profligate, and I looked this one up too, recklessly extravagant or wasteful in the use of resources, profligate cruise expansion when we need a cruise-free sea.
Thank you, Ms. O'Farrell. Clerk Hart, next speaker.
While significantly increasing the number of environmentally
Yes, our next speaker is Hannah Erickson.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm here on behalf of Discovery Health, which was founded by Drs. Ray and Ann Jarris in Seattle. Discovery Health has created was created on the principle of immediate access to expert medical advice and logistics for remote workers, specifically within the maritime and fishing industries. We specialize in extensive experience with emergency medicine, occupational health, remote medicine, telemedicine, and we have been especially equipped to handle the C-19 pandemic. In addition to the preventative and acute medical consultations, we are leaders in providing the COVID-19 testing, vaccinations, and management within the Puget Sound area. Outside of extending our COVID-19 management for maritime fishing vessels, we also partnered with the Washington Department of Health for handling high-volume drive-through testing sites in order to promote tracking and symptom tracking. As the cruise lines have returned to the Port of Seattle, we'd like to offer information for finding rapid testing options for cruise line requirements. With our locations around the Seattle area, we can handle both mobile testing, mobile vaccinations, and rapid testing options. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Erickson. Next speaker.
Yes, our final speaker signed up today is Noemi Maxwell.
Hello, thank you so much for taking my comments. I'm here today to ask you to defend tree equity and justice for the near airport Sea-Tac airport community. The Defenders of North Sea-Tac Park Community Forest Consensus calls for 1, permanent protection of the entire 220 acres of North Sea-Tac Park, 2, a moratorium on port deforestation of public land within 2 miles of the airport, and 3, a comprehensive forest plan to protect and restore a just and healthful level of tree canopy near the airport. The port proposes to develop an estimated 107 acres of mostly tree-covered land in Sea-Tac. This is a city with one of the lowest levels of tree canopy in the county, ranking 40th out of 45 according to King County's 30-year forest plan. The port's proposals are opposite to the recent recommendation of Public Health, Seattle and King County to increase tree canopy near the airport to limit human exposure to airport pollution. We know this pollution is causing people to live sicker and die sooner. We know it's linked to premature births, underweight babies, and learning problems in children in our community. The port's proposals would also violate its own commitments to reduce sprawl, protect forests, protect our climate, and act with social and racial justice. You, as our elected commissioners, have authority to withdraw these proposals and require that tree equity is in all your plans. We can't depend on the federal environmental assessment process to protect us, but we can depend on you. Today, over 1,450 community members have signed the consensus. This includes the mayor and 3 council members in Sea-Tac and council members from Des Moines, Normandy Park, and Tukwila, as well as Councilmember J.C. Harris, who spoke here today. Thank you, Councilmember Harris. It includes 26 organizations and businesses. We're doing our best to gather the voices of the consensus that already exists, that it's a simple matter of justice to allow all communities to retain a healthful level of tree canopy, and that the port, as a governmental agency, must protect the health of the people impacted by its operations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. That concludes our sign-ups today. Is there anyone else present on the Teams call who didn't sign up but who wishes to address the commission?
Yeah, I did sign up.
All right, if you can please state and spell your name, and then you'll have 2 minutes.
Yeah, hi, my name is Patrick McKee, McKee.
Go ahead, proceed.
Okay, good afternoon, commissioners. You know, I watched last meeting's public comment with interest. There were pro-cruise comments from the former chairman of the Wyoming Republican Party and a corporate attorney, and they could have been reading from the same playbook. Clearly, the cruise lobby is employing the strict talking point discipline the tobacco lobby and the oil lobby did before them. When they mention cruise tourism, they precede it with the adjective sustainable. So it feels like they're talking about something that already exists, sustainable cruise tourism. But sustainable has an actual definition. In the simplest terms, it means meeting our needs without ruining the prospects of our children and grandchildren. And by this definition, no aspect of cruise tourism is sustainable, from environmental damage to public health impact to labor conditions to perversion of local economies in Alaska and Seattle. You all are trying to make sense of this yourselves, trying to balance rosy economic projections with tragic, if painstakingly externalized costs. Is there money in it? Well, there must be for somebody. We know the mayor is heralding the return of cruise, and the port is trolling worldwide to run up the numbers not only of shipboard passengers, but of jet flights into and out of Sea-Tac. But what are we doing, really? What essential service is the Port of Seattle promoting? We're setting a couple of marine oil burning Vegas casinos afloat in the Salish Sea every day, that's all. Their sewers and engine waste drain into the open ocean while their exhaust systems expel particulate matter that sickens kids and melts Arctic ice. A single summer of Alaska cruise produces greenhouse gases equal to 1/3 of the annual output of the entire city of Seattle. The planet is already feeling the effects of climate cooking, more in the global south than in the fortunate geography of mountains and fjords we call home. Even here, though, we lived through the heat dome, except for the ones who didn't, mostly poor. You know, our starving resident orcas number in the mere dozens. Our grandchildren won't ever know there were once glaciers just across the water. Commissioners, the UN is telling us 2050 is too late. Doing the right thing will be a challenge for everyone. Let's start now, untangling our futures from cruise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKee. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the commission, either via Teams or here in person? Okay, at this time, I'll ask the clerk to give a synopsis of any written comments that we've received.
Thank you, and my apologies to Mr. McKee. That was my fault. So, good afternoon. We have received 20 written comments for the meeting today, and I will do a summary of those, a high-level summary. Megan Lass, Tracy McAlpine, Celine Riso, Robin Peterson, Jennifer Potter, Craig A., Eden Little, Thomas Rees, Barbara McMichaels, Dave Lips, Emily Neely, Dan Carraro, Stephanie Fatu, Aaron Neely, Regina Mutter, and Christopher Conker all submit written comments supporting the city of Sea-Tac taking ownership of the entirety of North Sea-Tac Park, with protections in place for its residential uses and natural resources, including forested land, waterways, and Tub Lake Bog. Jordan Van Vost, Hannah Erickson, Patrick McKee, and Noemi Maxwell submitted written comments to support their spoken comments, and that concludes our written comments received today.
All right, hearing no further public testimony, we'll move to the consent agenda. Mr. McKee, you can turn off your camera at this time.
Oh, I didn't know it was on. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you for your testimony.
Bye-bye.
That was exciting. All right. Next up is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and will be adopted by one motion. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered separately immediately after adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. We've heard of no items to be pulled today. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda covering items 8A, B, C, D, E, F, and G.
So moved.
Second. The motion was made and seconded. Commissioners, please say aye or nay when your name is called. No worries. Thank you for your testimony. Okay, bye-bye. That was exciting.
Beginning with Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasegawa.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Felleman. Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Calkins.
Aye. And please note that Commissioner Felleman has left the room momentarily.
Yes, there are 4 ayes and 0 nays for this item at this time.
And with that, the motion passes.
So moved.
The motion was made and seconded. Moving on in the agenda, we have 3 new business items today. Clerk Hart, please read the first item into the record. We'll then hear from Executive Director Metric to introduce the item.
Yes, this is agenda item 10A, introduction of resolution number 3802, a resolution to amend Unit 18 of the Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements of the Port of Seattle by declaring certain real property surplus and no longer needed for Port District purposes, deleting said property following a public hearing in accordance with law from Unit 18 of the Comprehensive Scheme, and authorizing the Executive Director to take all necessary steps and execute all documents for the sale of such real property to Bridgepoint Sea-Tac 300 LLC.
Commissioners, this action supports the extension of State Route 509 by declaring parcels that we have no operational use for as surplus property. Once we complete the first reading, this item will return to our agenda at the next commission meeting for adoption. Presenter we have is Steve Kennard, Property Manager for Aviation Properties, and I believe we have a Port Counsel, Senior Port Counsel John McLaughlin available for as needed. Steve.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Executive Director Metric and Commission. So first off, there is a technical amendment to Resolution 3802 on line 39, excuse me. The year 2008 should be 2009.
And Steve, I'm going to go ahead and pull up in your presentation, okay?
Okay.
Presenter we have is Steve Kennard, Property Manager for Aviation Properties, and I believe we have a Senior Port Counsel, John McLaughlin.
So let's go to the opening slide. Thank you. Good afternoon, Executive Commission. The issue before us today is this subject properties that we're calling the remnant parcels were purchased as part of a larger acquisition with FAA funds, noise funds, in 1976 and later on in the 70s. The parcels that are remaining are part of the ports, are left over from the port's 2009 sale of its most of the parcels that it had acquired. So just leaving a little bit after about selling about 19 acres. Bridge Industrial owns property to the southwest of the 509 right-of-way that was purchased. And WashDOT and Bridge have worked on a grading plan that will allow for the elevation differences between the two developments. One is the 509 extension and the other is the Bridge Industrial Warehouse development. So both WashDOT and Bridge have approached the port looking to have the port sell these remnant parcels to Bridge Industrial for the project, which is called Bridge Sea-Tac 300, Bridgepoint Sea-Tac 300. So in order to support WashDOT's extension of 509 and also to support the port's maintenance, future maintenance of these properties, we want to move forward. And so let's go to the next slide. One is the 509 extension, and the other is so you can see where this area is in location to the airport. So both the southwest corner of the airport properties, and the slide on the upper right shows the 2009 sale to WashDOT for the 509 right-of-way. The red areas show the parcels that were not acquired. So WashDOT has a requirement to buy only the land that they need, and so we end up with these remnant parcels. This has happened to us before. The 2019 image on the below right shows the same remnant parcels in a more modern image, and you can also see the school building, which is the old Maywood School, which has been unused for many years. Recently actually caught fire and now it's been demolished, but that school building in the shape of an H is one of the primary parcels that Bridge Industrial purchased for the Bridgepoint project. So these remnants are about an acre. They're inside the flight corridor safety program that the airport operates, where we remove obstacles as needed to maintain safe movement of aircraft. And our environmental team has done a survey of these areas to document what kind of vegetation and tree growth we have in these areas. So keep in mind when you look at these images, the future site of 509 will run to the northeast of those parcels, and the Bridge Industrial Development will run to the southwest. And the next slide will show how these things lay out. One of the primary parcels at Bridge. So let's see the next slide. For the Bridgepoint project. So in the blue, that's the original 509 right-of-way, and the 509 was extended with the sale of the port properties to WashDOT to the purple line. And then you can see the port parcels that are kind of sandwiched between the WashDOT's 509 right-of-way and the parcels that have been assembled by Bridge for development of some warehouse properties. So the port areas are in that zone that both WashDOT and Bridge need to do grading. No construction will happen on these sites other than a grade change, but the grade change will allow WashDOT to avoid having to build a retaining wall and the cost and the maintenance and schedule impacts associated with that. And for the port, the benefit is that we will have no maintenance on sites that are cut off from access, and we would also be concerned about the requirement that we continue to have to remove obstacles from these parcels. But when we sell them, there will be navigation easements placed on parcels, as well as all the other parcels that Bridge has acquired and assembled for this project. We'll put navigation easements, which require the owner to prevent the growth of trees or erecting obstacles in the flight path. And for the port, the benefit is. So, any questions about what we're proposing?
Commissioners, if you have a question, please raise your hand or indicate to me. Commissioner Fellman.
So am I to understand that there wouldn't be an navigation agreement on the site if it were not for this sale? I mean, for the other portions of the property, not for the sale.
We always seek navigation agreements, easements on adjacent properties, and in some cases we're able to obtain those. It usually this is an opportunity for us to obtain those as part of a transaction and then do it all at once. Any questions about what we're proposing?
Any additional questions? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Mohammed.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. I just have two questions. One, are we going to be selling this at market price?
Yeah, that's a good question. The FAA provided the funds for this purchase back in the 70s, and they require that we sell these at market price, and the funds will be returned to the noise program for future work and mitigation.
Okay, great. That's helpful. That was going to be my next question, was about the noise mitigation program, if that was going to go towards new projects or existing projects that we have going. Do we know if that's like towards an apartment complex? Do you know any of that information?
What we will do is return the proceeds to the noise program, but I don't know if they'll be earmarked. I think they'll go into a general fund, but I can follow up on that and find out.
Okay. I see Executive Metric is shaking his head. Yes.
Yeah, it's probably the general fund, but we'll confirm that, Commissioner.
Commissioner Hasegawa?
Yes, I'm wondering if this project would have any implication for old growth trees.
No, the tree survey that was done by the port's environmental team did not show any old growth trees in this area.
And I'm wondering if there's been any sort of racial impact assessment on how the removal of trees or green space would impact air quality for the surrounding neighborhoods.
We haven't gone to that level of environmental review. Our environmental team looked at these parcels in the context of how do you promote our mitigation around urban forests, and because the parcels are discontiguous and the tree cover is separated from and will be separated between both developments from other areas of forest, it's considered not to be a high priority for the port in this area to preserve, but we could follow up to get more information about what you requested. We haven't gone to that level of environmental review.
Thank you.
Our environmental team looked at
I see Commissioner Fellman has an additional question.
How do you promote
I'm looking for you up there. So is there not an obligation if we cut trees to have like the 4-to-1 ratio or something? I mean, did we just are able to say, well, it's only a couple of half acres?
I don't know the answer to that either. I'll follow up with our environmental team about what our obligations are there.
We're not doing anything to the property. We're transferring the property, selling the property.
Well, we're transferring the property knowing its use. I mean, and with the valuation, I was just wondering, I know that, is the current valuation based on, park value, or is it based on the fact that it's going to be turned into a commercial real estate development / 509 facilitation? I'm just wondering what is the valuation premised on, and given that we know its end use, it seems that we should be, and it doesn't have to be in the, it's in kind, but it doesn't have to be in place. It just seems like there are, I'm sure, other places we could plant trees.
We're evaluating we're having a commercial appraisal, and the appraisers using comps that are associated with similar types of projects, so other commercial developments in the region. And and then the price would be discounted for the specific condition of the parcels that we would have to take legal action to get access for these parcels. So, but it will be based not on their current use, but on a highest and best use.
And so you'll be able to get back to us about replacements for the canopy cover?
Yeah, I'll find out about if there's a requirement for that, and I'll get back to you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Hasegawa?
If the Port of Seattle's in the business of selling land, I'm wondering if there's been any express interest for acquiring this lot specifically and in competition.
No, there has not been. There hasn't been any express interest in these particular parcels. As I mentioned before, they're isolated and cut off from access. So no, that's not something we've done.
Any additional questions from commissioners?
When you say that it wasn't the port's priority to preserve trees, can you clarify? Is that what you said?
No, not that it's not that I said that it's not the port's priority to preserve trees, but these particular parcels are separated and discontinuous. And so the report that we had didn't place them in the highest priority for creating a contiguous forest parcel.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
All right, any additional questions?
When you say that
I think she can add, I think Sandy Kilroy can add to that, answer more on that about the canopy. Whatever you want to do, Mr. President.
Go ahead, Ms. Kilroy.
Thanks. We definitely will get, as a follow-up to this meeting, more in-depth answers, but the airport, we do have a developing land stewardship plan to guide our work, as well as completing tree replacement ratios. There are other, when a property we don't own gets developed, in this case, if this is sold, then the owner and developer has to follow whatever the local, state, and federal regulations are for any clearing or grading or tree replacement. Communities have local requirements, and there are also other state and permitting requirements having to do with how trees are managed during the development process. But we'll be happy to provide more in-depth detail on how we do tree management at the airport.
Okay, any further questions on this? And Clerk Hart, remind us, this is an introduction resolution, so we will have this again before us next month?
That is correct, at the next meeting, and there will be a public hearing associated with it at that time.
Okay. Go ahead.
So we may not have to, I mean, we could bind to this property the sale that they ascribe the same grow back as we do. There's nothing that would preclude us from saying, as a condition of this sale, you will do the same 4-to-1 that we do at the airport. I mean, without doing that, it will just defer to whatever the local ordinance is, but nothing precludes us from conditioning that. True?
Well, from I'll speak then, Sandra. From a transaction perspective, that's absolutely true. That we could require that as part of the transaction.
And then, thank you. And then the only other question is that I'm just trying to think about the valuation. You know, property's value is very much dependent on what it's adjacent to. So for this parking lot, I mean, obviously for the 509, I see this as a public thing, but there's a private interest that is going to see some, probably more value than the square footage has to the general public, right? I mean, how is that considered?
The valuation is using comps. In fact, one of the comps used in the appraisal is the purchase of the school building that you see on the screen. So the pricing will be based on comparable types of sales. The parcels themselves don't add to the ability of the developer to expand their buildings. It just allows both the developer and WashDOT to come up with a grading plan that will be easier for WashDOT to maintain.
The benefit is to WashDOT.
Of course, there's benefit to the developer as well, but WashDOT directly called us and asked about this for the purpose of the 509 project. For them, it's a benefit in both schedule and cost. The parcels themselves don't add to the ability of the developer to expand.
Any further questions or comments?
Both the developer and WashDOT.
Okay, I want to just make a special show of appreciation to Steve for taking on some really intense questioning over this. I know we have another couple of weeks to review it. I presume we will get some answers on those particular questions, but at this time, if there are no further questions on this item, do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk Hart, can you please call the roll for commissioners?
Yes, and before I do that, just to note that technical correction that Mr. Kennard mentioned, well, actually, it's just a date typo, so it will
Does not require a formal amendment.
correct, and it will come in its proper form at the next meeting.
Okay.
So beginning with Commissioner Mohammed for the vote on introduction.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasagawa.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Felleman.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you. There are 5 ayes and 0 nays for this item.
With that, the motion passes. Resolution number 3802 will be back before the commission on May 24th, 2022 for public hearing and consideration of adoption. And in the interim, commissioners may reach out to staff with any additional questions you have about that. Clerk Hart, can you please read the next item into the record? We'll then hear from Executive Director Metric to introduce the item.
Yes, this is agenda item 10B. It is a public hearing and introduction of resolution number 3803, a resolution authorizing the sale of a portion of the parcel. This is parcel number 536720-2505 to King County to be used as a site for building a new combined sewer overflow facility and applying a boundary line adjustment to divide the parcel covering both Northwest Seaport Alliance and Port of Seattle properties into 2 parts, the bigger and the majority part to remain with the Alliance, the smaller part, which is at the southeast corner of Southwest Michigan Street and 2nd Avenue Southwest, to be sold to King County, and amending the port's comprehensive scheme to delete the smaller part of the parcel, same parcel number, boundary line adjustment pending from Unit 20 of the port's comprehensive scheme, and authorize its sale to King County Wastewater Treatment Division. If I must.
Commissioner, state law requires a public hearing when conveying or transferring surplus property. This action supports the development of a combined sewer overflow tank on a parcel south of Terminal 115. This would result in water quality and health benefits on the Duwamish River. Like the previous resolution, once we complete the first reading, this item will return to our agenda at the next commission meeting for adoption. Presenter is Lily Ninberg, Real Estate Manager from the Economic Development, Portfolio and Asset Management Office.
And authorize its sale to King County Wastewater Treatment Division.
Good afternoon, commissioners and executive metric. My name is Lily Yuan Nimberg, pronouns she, her, and I want to say also happy AAPI Heritage Month. And I myself is an immigrant to this country. I came to this country when I was 25, so I witnessed all the great work that the port is doing at advancing EDI. Thank you for that. It also segues really well to what the item that I'm presenting on. I believe this the staff believes this this item will bring great benefits to the communities that the port serves. Today is the first hearing and introduction of Resolution 3803 regarding sale of a small piece of property to King County. That resolution is also attached to your commission memo. There will be a second hearing for the final approval, which is scheduled to happen on May 24th, which is about 2 weeks away. The property we're talking about here is, as you can see in the map, it's a postage stamp sized blue shaded area. It's separated by a right of way from the larger T115, Terminal 115, the bigger parcel. And it's about 1.3 acres. And we're proposing to sell to King County at $2.2 million at market value. Currently, there's a tenant on a month-to-month lease, American Best Trucking. Next slide, please. Here is, as you can see in the map, it's a postage stamp size. Wait, do I run the slide? Next slide, please. There's a lot of background information on this. The main point I'd like to make is really King County needs this piece of property to build a combined sewer overflow facility to comply with the EPA consent decree. This decision is made after a rigorous site selection process. If we can't come to an agreement with King County, then King County can resort to using eminent domain to acquire this piece of property. Next slide, please. There's a lot of background information. So again, as we described in the memo, actually, very extensive and rigorous site selection process determined that this is the most appropriate site and based on its location and size. So aside from the location, we have been focusing on the benefits of the proposed CSO facility to the communities which the port also serves. Next slide, please. This proposed CSO facility will control sewer spills into the Duwamish River from 2 different outfalls. This will have great water quality and health benefits. So to all the communities around the Duwamish River and even the fishery resources in the river. We negotiated over 3 years with King County on the value and location of this proposed CSO facility, compared and explored different alternatives. Next slide, please. It's clear that what the staff recommendation is. We laid out other alternatives in greater detail in the memo. So in the next slide, I'd like to give you a bit more information on the general terms of the transaction. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder, this property is about 1.3 acres, so it's not big. It's also separated by a right-of-way from the larger Terminal 115. There was appraisal that was done back in 2018. The appraisal was then reviewed and determined the sale price of $1.89 million. So we have then adjusted the sale price to $2.2 million to reflect the passing time and also with the market rate increase. So the sale price now is just up to $2.2 million. Also, King County has entered into 2 site investigative agreements with the port and American Best Trucking, the tenant there, to conduct due diligence work. They have 2 years from execution of the purchase and sales agreement to close the transaction, the deal. Another reminder is the second reading, which will happen on May 24th. The slide has got the date wrong. Sorry about that. the mistake there. It should be May 24th. That's it.
Thank you, Lily. Any questions for Lily or for staff?
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead, Commissioner Cho.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation, Lily, and for your comments about the Heritage Month. 2 years of due diligence seems like a long time. What happens to the tenant in those 2 years?
Then we can keep this. We don't have to sell, basically. So they're under a PPCD, the purchase consent decree with ecology also, so that they need a period of time to do the site investigative work to be able to meet the requirements under the PPCD.
Oh, actually, I was referring to, I think you said earlier that there was a trucking company that was a
Yeah.
So what happens to that tenant during the due diligence period?
During the due diligence period, they can stay on site, and we have communicated with the tenant from the get-go. So from 2018, once King County has approached the port, we had made this known to them, and they have willingly entered into 2 site access agreement with the port and King County to allow King County access site to do the site geotechnical work on site.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Thanks.
Lily, you said a month. I'm sorry, just to clarify. I think that was a month-to-month lease. That's what.
Yes, month-to-month.
Any additional questions?
During the due diligence period,
Commissioner Fallon?
So getting back to the trucks, how many trucks can park there?
Right now, about they need turning radius. So when you go there, it looks as if it's not full, but it is completely full. But yet there is a gap in the between because the turning radius has to be there. It's about anywhere 20 to 35, depending on the day.
Pretty small number. So
Small.
is there identified a place for them to go? Or
Well, per lease, we are not obligated to do that. But we can help them. I did notify them. Well, they will start looking also on their own. So we have been in talks with other real estate managers about, if there's anything even available. So.
because I know we delayed the sale of T10, that there was, and I don't know whether there was space there before potentially having to move them as well, but as an interim, it would be interesting to know whether we could pick them up as a tenant over there. But I just want to express the fact that stormwater is like the biggest impact of Puget Sound. So having a CSO is a good thing. And so also the cleanup of the Duwamish, the challenge there is the background pollution. So as long as there's runoff coming off the hillside, we're putting good money after bad. So so this is a very important thing to do. I appreciate you making good progress on that. At the same time, trucks are a problem to our communities as well. And so I urge us to find a win-win situation. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Okay. With that, Commissioners, at this time, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Each speaker has 2 minutes to address the commission. Clerk Hart, do we have anyone signed up to give testimony on this item?
No one has signed up to speak. If you'd like to call for anyone who hasn't signed up.
Is there anyone who would like to speak who has not signed up? Having no additional speakers, I'll go ahead and close this public hearing and move discussion to the commission. Is there a motion to introduce resolution 3803?
So moved.
Seconded.
The motion was made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Right. With that, Clerk Hart, can you take the roll? Commissioners, please say aye or nay when your name is called. Commissioner Cho, if you say yay, we won't count it.
Beginning with Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasakawa.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Felleman.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Calkin.
Yay.
Thank you. There are, I won't do it. There are five ayes and 0 nays for this item.
With that, the motion to introduce resolution number 3803 passes. This item will be back before the commission for consideration of adoption at the May 24, 2022 meeting. Clerk Hart, please read the next item into the record. We'll then hear from Executive Director Metric to introduce it.
Thank you. This is agenda item 10C, authorization for the executive director to authorize a budget increase for the Concourse A building expansion for lounges project at Seattle Tacoma International Airport by Delta Airlines Incorporated, and authorize an increase to the reimbursement amount to Delta for a total cost of $26,500,000 of an estimated total project cost of $105 million.
Commissioners, last year you approved a tenant reimbursement agreement to expand Concourse A for development of additional lounge space. Since that time, costs have escalated due to a number of reasons. Staff have worked tirelessly to run the numbers and validate estimations to bring forward this request for additional funding today. Having an adequate lounge space is one of the many measures that can help us get to a 5-star airport. Presenters today are Jeff Moken, Interim Director, Aviation Business and Properties, and John McWilliams, Capital Project Manager. So I guess I'll turn it over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, good afternoon, Executive Director Metric, and thank you. And good afternoon, commissioners and port colleagues. As just mentioned, there's a PowerPoint that should go along with this. If we could have that on display, please.
Yes, give me one moment.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Beginning with Commissioner Mohammed. Aye. Thank you. Commissioner Hasakawa. Aye. Thank you. Commissioner Felleman. Okay, it did not open it. Bear with me. Thank you. Commissioner Calkins. Yay. Thank you. I won't do it. There are five ayes and 0 nays. And here we go.
And with that, the motion to introduce resolution number 3803 passes. This item will be back before the commission for consideration of adoption at the May.
Great, thanks for that. And the next slide, please.
Clerk Hart, please read the next item into the record. We'll then hear from Executive Director Metric.
Okay, and just to repeat once again, John McWilliams and I are requesting the commission authorization for a budget increase for $26.5 million, as well as a reimbursement increase to Delta Airlines for construction under the tenant reimbursement agreement by approximately $24 million. Next slide, please. Well, I know this topic has been socialized as a very important and exciting initiative here. I'll provide just a little bit more of a background, if you will, especially for our two newest commissioners. But predominantly and more specifically, the expansion of our lounges here at SCA will support increased passenger levels, especially in concert with the opening of our IAF facility, which is being celebrated, and rightfully so. And I think also noting that as we bring on the IAF, as it's called, we're also seeing a resurgence not only from our former airline partners with their travel back into SCA, but we're also, into the next 5 months, we'll be embarking on some new service, specifically with airlines such as Turkish Airlines and Finnair and Air Tahiti Nui. So as you can see, we are slowly starting to see a resurgence back to normalcy. And I know we're all greet that with a great sense of enthusiasm. A little bit more background on the lounges, specifically between 2015 and 2019. What we saw in these amenities known as our airport lounges was a total improvement or volume increase of 390% in shared use lounges. That's actually phenomenal. And when you consider Concourse A alone, 899% of our customers, joint customers, seeking a lounge, notably in the Concourse A area, which, as we know, is adjacent to the IAF. So you can see the two are closely aligned. The club at SCA, which is our own branded lounge, we have two of them, as you know, one in the South Satellite, as well as in Concourse A. Unfortunately, the good news is that we're seeing a great resurgence in our business. The bad news is that our lounges are very, very space constrained, and that certainly takes away from the customer experience. And it's something we're working so incredibly hard to address, especially if we wish to be a 5-star carrier. Just prior to the pandemic, what we were seeing on a monthly basis is just roughly 861 customers a month were being turned away due to a lack of space for their needs. And this is a critical point, because not only does this mean these airlines that are flying from long-haul overseas destinations who don't have their own branded lounge here and thus choose to use the club at SCA's, those valuable customers, those important customers, we want to give them a great experience, and we've had to actually turn them away. From an economic perspective, 861 customers per month averages anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 in incremental revenue that we've had to deny. And so we can see that we're motivated on several different fronts to be prepared for the future. Also noting that Delta Airlines will be constructing their own lounge on Concourse A using a tenant reimbursement agreement. And so prior to my arrival here at the port, we came to you at April 27, 2021 for the first approval for this really exciting project. And then I came before you on December 14th to discuss the 60% design. And so now we're returning to you to ask for an increase in our project budget. So with that, I'll ask John McWilliams to give us some of the more specifics on this project.
Thanks, Jeff. Let's see, next slide, please. And good afternoon, Executive Director Metric and Commissioners. So here you see the project location. It is near the end of Concourse A, across from Gate A11 and south of the International Arrivals Facility. Next slide, please. And here is an exterior rendering view from the southeast. Concourse A is shown on the left side, and the IAF is on the right side. The scope of this project includes a 52,000 square foot building addition and a reconfiguration of existing spaces in the adjacent area in order to interface with the building addition. The mezzanine level of this addition will house the port's common use passenger lounge and hold leasable office space. Above that is the Delta Sky Club on 2 levels. Next slide, please. This aerial view shows the relocation of the existing airport maintenance shop where they work on passenger loading bridges. The shop is at the upper right corner of the screen. That's the current location, and it's being displaced by the new building expansion on Concourse A, and is being moved to a new facility at the 188M site at the south end of the airfield. The new location is shown within the red circle near the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. Okay, the increased project costs fall into the categories shown here on the screen. There are scope additions, including demolition of an existing airport building deemed unfit to renovate, and construction of a new building in its place. So that will house the relocated maintenance shop, and that's being displaced. Then there are the construction market conditions impacted by global supply chain conditions that have created significant cost increases, uncertainty, and volatility within the construction industry. Additionally, we have a contractor buyout contingency. So this is additional contingency the contractor has applied to the proposal to cover cost increase risks until all trade partner subcontractors are under contract. Prices keep going up at such a rate, there's a lot of unknown until the trade partners actually sign the contracts. And soft costs for Delta Airlines and the ports. These are costs associated with developing the design and providing support during construction. And Delta and the port are eager for Delta to execute a fixed guaranteed maximum price with their contractor to reduce the risk of further market volatility and cost increases. Next slide, please. The increased project costs fall into 5 categories described on the previous slide. And here you can see the breakdown of those costs, and that they total up to the $26.5 million budget increase that we are requesting today. Next slide, please. Okay, the project risks are associated with schedule impacts. If the design and permitting of the new maintenance shop takes longer than anticipated, construction of the Concourse A expansion could be further delayed. And there will be some construction in and around the adjacent port common use passenger lounge. We have temporary alternate accommodations for passenger lounge users during that construction. If that construction takes longer than anticipated, the alternate accommodation would need to be extended. Next slide, please. The current authorized project budget is $78.5 million, and the total project budget being requested today is $105 million. The TRA amounts with Delta would increase as well. TRAs are tenant reimbursement agreement from the previously authorized value of $65.92 million to about $90 million, up to the sorry, I lost my place. And then the as far as the schedule goes, construction would be starting in the 3rd quarter of this year and finished in the 1st quarter of 2024. Okay, this concludes the prepared part of our presentation. Thank you for your time today. Are there any questions we can answer?
Thank you, Jeff and John, for the presentation. That was really well presented. Are there questions from commissioners or comments? Go ahead, Commissioner Cho.
Yeah, out of curiosity, this is still going to be a shared lounge, correct? Or is it Delta exclusive?
Yeah, so the building, in fact, this is a building shell and core that the project is building. So it will be a Delta lounge on 2 levels and a port common use lounge expansion area on the mezzanine level. So the Delta will be responsible for designing and constructing the interior of their own lounge, and the port has a separate project that's authorized for design currently to design the interior of the expanded port common use lounge.
Okay, actually, that's good clarity, actually. And then with regards to the common use lounge, can you just give us an idea of what airlines would be utilizing that one?
Yeah, that would be for the airlines that don't have enough flights that would provide for the airlines to have their own dedicated lounge, like Delta Airlines or Alaska Airlines. It would be some of the smaller or international carriers with fewer flights.
Okay, I can infer from that what those airlines would be. Thank you.
Yeah, and Commissioner Shaw, I can offline those airlines to you if you need that information.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Mohammed.
Great. I have a quick question. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I asked a question during Aviation Committee regarding accessibilities in the Sky Lounge area. And it sounds like this project is going to be 2 floors. And the question I asked during the Aviation Committee was, when there are 2 floors in a mezzanine area, is a ramp or an elevator required? And the response back I got was that if the mezzanine is less than 25% of the total area of the lounge and offers the same services that are available in the lower area, then we're exempt by code to require an elevator or ramp. I think from a customer service standpoint, having a ramp just helps us get to that 5-star goal. And I'm wondering if this is something that's going to be considered for this particular project.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner, for the question. So these lounges are served by the elevators. Due to the constrained footprint we're working with, ramps do take up quite a bit more space, and we are already struggling to find space anywhere we can on this small airport footprint. So there will not be a ramp up there like a Guggenheim Museum spiral, but there is definitely access to all areas for all users via elevator.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? Commissioner Fellman?
So does this block any of the light out of the IAF? It looks like it butts up right into a.
Yeah, this area, so at the south end of the IAF, where this butts up to, that is really a bank of elevators, so there's not really any view. There's some small band of clerestory lighting, but it's really not much. It's mostly blocked in the IAF by their own elevators, so we're not impacting this much at all.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner.
Just one question for me. Has the majority in interest weighed in on this project?
Yes, they did vote on this and approve it back at the end of last year. And in fact, we're going to have a briefing update for them this week as well on the schedule updates.
And I guess I do have 2 questions. When we think about a big capital project like this, I always wonder about the payback period. What do we think the payback period is for this within the kind of unique financial system that we use with our rates and charges covering the overall airport budget each year and figuring out how to amortize a big project like this over many years? What do we anticipate being the payback period for all the revenues that will come in after this is constructed?
Yeah, our finance and budget staff have analyzed this and determined that it does pay back. So this is a profitable undertaking for the airport. As far as the specific payback amount, I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question at this time. If anybody else knows, otherwise I will be happy to get back to the Commissioner.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Okay. Any?
Commissioner.
I
Sorry,
see
Commissioner. I don't
Managing
have anyone
Director
from
of the airport, Lance Little.
Yes, sorry. I don't have anyone has the specific detail. The finance team had done the NPV calculation and it was positive. The specifics, we can get that to you at a later date if that's okay.
I mean, honestly, it was a sort of a yes/no question, and you've answered it with that. But it would be a nice follow-up.
Okay.
Are there any further questions or comments? Okay.
So so Delta is building the whole thing. It's under there. That's the way, right? And so
Yeah, this is a tenant reimbursement agreement. Yes.
right. And so that would include the port facility, the renovation to the. Well, we do the interior. We do the interior, but whatever structural stuff is. So we're because there was this additional escalation of cost that we're paying Delta based on these other, these parameters that you said, in addition to the overall cost, our portion of it with the 24 million or help me understand the piece that the port is obligated to Delta for.
Okay, so we would increase the overall budget by the 26.5 million, and that would the increase to the Delta tenant reimbursement agreement would increase up to about $90 million.
Okay, so the overall, right. So the overall expense goes up, and so the tenant reimbursement, that's just the total amount. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, is there a motion and a second for this item?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Clerk Hart, please call the roll for the vote. Commissioners, please say aye or nay when your name is called.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoskawa.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Pellman.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you. And Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you. You have 5 ayes and 0 nays for this item.
All right, and with that, the motion passes. We are now moving to item 11, which is presentations and staff reports. This is a unique staff presentation that has been pre-recorded, something that we've been asking to allow our staff to pre-record presentations in order to facilitate a sort of more robust presentation method. And so I'm really excited for this one myself. I'm grateful to the staff that undertook this initiative to be the kind of guinea pigs in this first attempt. But please take good notes, commissioners, while this video is playing, because you're obviously not going to be able to stop and ask them. It's pre-recorded.
I mean, they didn't anticipate our questions.
They did. That's the thing. We're not going to have any questions after the presentation. Clerk Hart, please go ahead and read the item into the record, and then Executive Director Metric will introduce it.
Thank you. Aubrey, are you ready? Okay. This is agenda item 11A, Forterra Ace Green Cities Closeout Report.
Commissioners and Mr. President, thanks for letting us test drive this method, because I think one of the things is a known timeline, a known time for the presentation as well. So thanks for letting us test out and try to innovate in this side. Commissioners, the ACE Green Cities Partnership Programs in the near airport cities of Burien, Des Moines, and Sea-Tac was made possible due to the 2016 allocation of funding by the Port Commission. The Port and Forterra staff will co-present a closeout report on the ACE Green City Partnerships Program. This report will include an overview of the urban forest enhancement plans or efforts increasing tree canopy in our leadership moving forward. After the presentation, the video, we have Andy Gregory, Senior Program Manager, Environmental Engagement, and Jenny Ugolino, Green Cities Program Manager with Forterra, who will both be available to answer questions. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to the video, Clerk Hart.
Something that we've been asking to allow our staff to pre-record presentations in order to facilitate a sort of more robust presentation method. And so I'm really excited for this one myself. I'm grateful to the staff that undertook this initiative to be the kind of guinea pigs.
Just give us a moment here while we get that video up.
Please take good notes, commissioners, while this video is playing, because you're obviously not going to be able to stop and ask them. It's pre-recorded.
You already are. Hang on.
They did. That's the thing. We're not going to have any questions after the presentation. Clerk Hart, please go ahead and read the item into the record, and then Executive Director Metric will introduce it.
Yeah, thank you. This is agenda item 11A for Tara.
Getting to do that. Where is it?
Closeout report.
I know it's invited.
Mr. President, thanks for that.
Anymore.
This method, because I think one of the things is a known time for the presentation as well. So thanks for letting us test out and try to innovate.
Got it. You bet.
The ACE Green Cities Partnership Programs in the near airport cities of Burien, Des Moines, and Sea-Tac was made possible due to the 2016 allocation of funding by the Port Commission. The Port and Forterra staff will co-present a closeout report on the ACE.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Executive Director Metric. Thank you for having us here today. We're here to discuss the ACE Green City Partnerships closeout report.
After the presentation,
my name is Andy Gregory, and I'm Senior Program Manager for Community Engagement, working to support the environmental program at the airport.
And I'm Jenny Galino, Green Cities Program Manager at Forterra.
So with that, I think we'll turn it over to the video.
So today we'll provide you with an overview of this work, starting with the background of the ACE, or Airport Community Ecology Fund, then talking through the urban forest assessments that Forterra conducted for each of the cities, Burien, Sea-Tac, and Des Moines. We'll talk about the unique community engagement that was done to support this program, the urban forest enhancement plans that have formed the foundation of the stewardship work that's taking place today, the work to support Des Moines Memorial Drive and the reforestation of elm trees along the drive, implementation of this great work in the 3 cities that were supported, accomplishments, and next steps. I'd like to start today with some background on the ACE, or Airport Community Ecology Fund. This fund was launched in 2016 and provided $1 million of support to the cities of Burien, Des Moines, and Sea-Tac. The Commission at the time recognized that these cities closest to the airport receive disproportionate impacts from airport operations and therefore should receive additional benefits. The work was intended to support environmental programs in the cities and was divided into 2 primary programs. One, a small matching grants program that was provided opportunities for community groups to apply for funding up to $10,000 to support community-led restoration and other public improvement projects. The next, a contract with Forterra to launch Green City Partnership programs in each of the cities. The Green City Partnerships, which Jenny will discuss further, are the regional standard for urban forest restoration and provide opportunities for cities and communities to get together to plot a plan to recover urban forests. So with that, I'll switch to the next slide and hand it over to Jenny.
Thank you so much, Andy. Very proud to be here and represent Forterra, a 30-year nonprofit working across the state of Washington, and specifically our Green Cities program, which has a 15-year history, beginning in 2005 with the city of Seattle and developing unique partnerships with cities, Forterra as a nonprofit, other nonprofit and private funders, and community members. You'll see with the adjacent map that in the past 15 years we've expanded, and with the port's support, we're able to continue our work in South King County, building partnerships in Sea-Tac, Burien, and Des Moines. We're grateful for this funding, recognizing Forterra's leadership in a unique partnership, really interested in a long-term stewardship of urban parks and natural areas, working alongside an informed and engaged community in order to make a lasting impact. Go to the next slide, please. So typically when we begin a Green City partnership, first we undergo a forest assessment. In most cases, and in this case with our ACE Green Cities partnerships, we worked with a nationally recognized sub-consultant in forest management, American Forest Management, and collaborated with each city to define the boundaries of our assessment. What was unique in this case under the guidance of the board was to not only perform an assessment of urban parks and natural areas within each city limits, but to extend our assessment of the urban canopy into all trees within each city park, which within each city municipality, looking at street trees, backyard trees, and other trees within the region. And this assessment breaks down the canopy into habitat management units, which are units of 10 acres or less in size that are characterized by their habitat and other natural boundaries. And this helps us to break apart and prioritize our work in urban forest management and restoration, taking a look at invasive and native species cover in what we call a triage model to prioritize work in areas of the highest risk that will also receive the greatest benefits. Additionally, we worked with another sub-consultant called Core GIS to overlay specific economic and social factors, which helped us understand where canopy was and where canopy wasn't in relation to things like public schools, low-income housing, senior centers, and the like. And what we found was specifically that urban canopy percentage was lesser within a quarter mile of public schools, which provided the impulse to secure additional funding and pilot a new Green Cities model working specifically with public school students on public school campuses, continuing this work. Next slide, please. This project was also unique in our approach to community engagement, as Andy recognized neighboring communities receiving more benefits in terms of this project, recognizing a long history of environmental and social justice and the inherent barriers of receiving personalized feedback that was representative of the communities that we are working in. Some barriers that we work to remove, such as language barriers and community trust, was only made possible through our partnership with Global to Local, a local nonprofit using a community connectors model, which is designed to reach harder to reach community members. And so in addition to having traditional open houses and surveys, community connectors made one-on-one relationships with community members. And across the board, we heard more broader concerns beyond the specific mapping of urban forest canopy and canopy cover, right? We heard feedback more broadly on concerns of public health and climate change, those immediate impacts on the community and the community's basic needs, and how all of these issues impact young people of today. And this direct feedback, along with the results from the forest assessment, really drove us to focus increasing canopies near public schools. Next slide. So based on all of that research and quantitative and qualitative information, incorporating results from our analysis and modeling and feedback from the community, we created 20-year plans and guides tailored to the needs of each city, Sea-Tac, Burien, and Des Moines. And while an initial impetus might be to plant trees straight away, and we certainly did plant many trees over the life of the project, this investment from the port really lays the foundation for continued strategic planning. These are 20-year plans which outline costs and resources needed, highlight priority park areas, and this continues to shape our focus, our fundraising, stewardship plans for parks, and work with new partners. Another unique element of this project was the opportunity to work along the Des Moines Memorial Drive in collaboration with the Des Moines Memorial Drive Preservation Association and their very important work of drawing attention and commemorating the lives of Washington residents lost in the Great War. Now, many of the trees that were initially planted around this 8-mile stretch have since died or were removed for other reasons. And this proved a unique challenge as a multi-jurisdictional space where not all land is publicly accessible. And so what we did with the support of Forterra's GIS director and city partners was to access both ArcGIS shapefiles, national agricultural data, and tax parcel information to identify privately held lands and their land cover criteria, whether or not there were buildings, other green space, open water, and design a very tailored and interactive ArcGIS web map for landowners to be able to look up on their property and see if it was suitable for an elm tree planting and commemorative plaque. We also created a complement of an outreach mailer and flyer to do this direct outreach. Now, while we regret that no elm trees were planted as part of this project, we believe that this research and body of work will continue to be a successful way for the Preservation Association to move forward with this great work. Next slide. In collaboration with the Des Moines Memorial Drive Preservation Association. The on-the-ground implementation of these urban forestry projects is the lifeblood of Forterra's work. It's the work that really brings energy in this partnership with all of our partners. And the foundation of this work traditionally has been our Forest Steward program, where we train community members to lead restoration events in their local park or green space. And one story that comes to mind is a forest steward in the city of Des Moines who had learned about the port's investment and reached out to the city parks department for additional resources to clean up Des Moines City Park, which, although in a very residential area with a lot of young families, was underutilized as the space was overrun by a lot of invasives, didn't have the kind of sight lines to make people feel encouraged to join the space. And through Forterra's support, they organized community group gatherings to remove truckloads of litter from the space and began invasive species removal in order to create a gathering space where now Boy Scouts implement service projects, families come and learn and share with one another, and we hold ongoing restoration events throughout the year. I'd also like to highlight the work of Partner in Employment. Partner in Employment is another local nonprofit working with recent immigrants and refugees in South King County, who really recognized, especially over the time of COVID, that more youth opportunities were needed, and we were able to pay through a subcontract 25 youth to learn restoration techniques, to learn leadership skills, to learn more about green job pathways in the region. And they were the ones last year in the fall of 2021 who helped us implement Green City Day events, which are large-scale planting events, which took place in each of the 3 cities. And they helped put together planting plans, plant orders, gave plant demos day of, and helped us all to celebrate the urban forest. Next slide. So here you can see some of the key measures of success for this on-the-ground implementation. Particularly like to point out that we trained 14 forest stewards, much like the steward at Kitty City Park, to steward their local park or green space. We're currently active doing restoration events in 11 parks across the region and have planted nearly 1,000 trees. Next slide. And the port's initial investment of $450,000, looking at this pie chart here, you can truly see the level of community investment and the participation, not just on a community level of forest stewards, city staff, and other local governmental partners really coming together to champion this work. Over $1.28 million has been invested to date, including almost $500,000 of non-port matching funds. And I know that this network that has been leveraged through these partnerships built literally planting the seeds for continued work in urban forest restoration in the region. And we're grateful for the port's leadership in that process. Next slide.
Helped us implement Green City Day events, which are large-scale planting events.
Thank you, Jenny, for both your presentation as well as your leadership in this space. We appreciate your time and all the work that Forterra has put into this project over the last 4 years. I want to talk a little bit about next steps and the continued role of port leadership in the environmental space in South King County. The port had the foresight to provide this initial investment to the community, which, as you can see, has blossomed into amazing new partnerships and new leadership opportunities within South King County. We'd like to continue that work by continuing the investments of the South King County Community Impact Fund, specifically the Environmental Grants Program. This program builds off the successful Airport Community Ecology Fund small matching grants model and expands out the work beyond just Sea-Tac, Des Moines, and Burien to include other neighboring cities and to fund larger projects up to $60,000 over the course of 3 years. We really see this as the best way to directly invest in the communities that are on the front lines of this work to empower the leaders of the future. Here are just a couple examples of current projects that have been funded through the South King County Fund, which are doing just that, implementing the work of Forterra's urban forest management plans and empowering frontline communities to be the leaders of the environmental justice movement going forward. First would be the African Young Dreamers Empowerment Program, which is going to be doing youth activism and restoration in the city of Des Moines. Serve Ethiopians Washington, which will be training forest stewards to work in Angle Lake Park and paying them for their work. The Dirt Corps, which will be working with students from New Start High School to conduct forest restoration in Salmon Creek Park. And Partner in Employment, which you heard from Jenny, has been just a foundational partner in this work and sharing their incredible knowledge of community and what it takes to provide wraparound services for youth and of immigrant families to conduct this work. And finally, I would just like to close by saying that we will be also investing $400,000 in a community capacity building contract that will provide direct support and resources to other nonprofits and community groups, as well as the cities who are just incredibly valuable partners in this work going forward, so that the movement continues to grow and this work can be sustained going into the future. So thank you all for your time today. We look forward to any questions that you might have.
In the communities that are on the front lines of this work to empower the leaders of the future. Here are just
Andy and Jenny, thank you so much for the pre-recorded presentation. That was excellent. Thanks for being our guinea pigs, as we mentioned before, for that attempt to provide the presentation in a way that's easily distributable too for folks who aren't able to tune in either in person or in the live stream right now. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to commissioners now with any questions or comments on the presentation. Commissioner Mohammed, I saw you make a move first to the mic.
Yeah, Jenny and Andy, thank you for the presentation. That was super informative, and I will just say I love this fund and project that you guys all are taking on. The Airport Community Ecology Fund is, the type of funds and projects that excite me and happy to be on the Port Commission to support similar projects. I love the community connector model, the community navigator model, the Green City Day events that you guys have, and I've participated in those in South King. The question I had was around slide 10. Jenny, you said you guys planted about 1,000 trees. Is there efforts to monitor those trees? Like, how do you ensure that they're growing?
The movement continues to grow and this work can be sustained.
Sure, that's a great question. Thank you, Commissioner. Part of our model is when we select park sites for plantings for Green City Days, and normally we select one park site per city annually, and that rotates in, the different parks that have active restoration projects during the year. We select projects that currently have forest stewards, working and hosting events in that space. And so they're really the folks that are kind of the eyes and ears on the ground to, check in on things and make sure everything is looking healthy, reach out to us and request additional resources or park staff that we need to mulch this area or work on a watering plan or gather additional volunteers for this space and follow up. But it's all part of site-specific stewardship plans that we create for the year and revisit year over year.
And is that reported back to the port?
In terms of the stewardship plans?
Yeah, like the data on like if there's an issue with the tree or anything along those lines. Does that information that you're sharing get
Not
reported back to
currently, no. However, with our Evergreen Carbon Capture program, which is another program of Forterra, we do work on a similar model to your funders, and so we do have that foundation as an organization to continue out with a model like that.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great if that. I'm sure it would be helpful for our port teams. The other question that I had was around the 20-year plan that was tailored to each city. Where's that information found? Is that like published on each city site or is that on our port site?
And normally we select one. Yes, I believe that you've all received copies of these plans, but they are publicly available information and they're hosted on usually the city's website, Forterra's website, and happy to share those offline as well.
Okay, great. That's helpful. That's all my questions. Thank you so much for this amazing work that you're doing.
Any additional questions or comments? Commissioner Hasegawa. Commissioner Fellman.
I didn't know whether we were going to get the live ones back again, so thank you. This just avoids us from interrupting you along the way, but we still get the subject.
That was entirely ministerial motive.
Yeah. So thank you. And so it is the end of an era here where the ACE fund is now emptied. This is the case, you're saying, right? And
so I think if I could just really quickly, this is the completion of the Forterra contract portion of the ACE fund. There are some, as we noted, as we transitioned from the ACE small matching grants program into the South King County Fund, there were some funds left in the matching grants program. I think we have finally allocated all of those funds with the projects that came in round 2 of the South King County environmental grants program this year.
Well, it's great that the spirit of it continues, and I was very happy to be part of that with then Commissioner Creighton. So right now, though, I think those plans are beautiful, and I love the hard copies. You should all get a copy of those. They're great plans. And the fact that you are actually implementing them is more important. I was disappointed to hear that there's no elms been planted yet. Is there I understand it's a difficult multi-jurisdictional thing, but it also had that particularly sentimental quality to it. Was there some technical impediment or what was the challenge there?
But they are publicly available information and they're hosted.
Sure, I think I'll jump in and then Jenny, you can follow up as well. I think Commissioner Pellman, there were several challenges in siting and stewarding the trees is a challenge. identifying a source. I think Forterra identified a nursery that could source the trees, and they had sort of like minimum quantity order requirements, and we had challenges even in the outreach that was done in meeting those requirements. Additionally, I think it's important to note that COVID has played a major impediment role in the prevention of some of the community engagement and on the ground implementation that was envisioned at the onset of this program. I think, the first couple of years were really spent in this planning and coordination phase, and then it was envisioned that we'd have an army of volunteers out there planting trees. And I think that this program, specifically the support for Des Moines Memorial Drive, was impeded in that way. I think I would like to note that the Des Moines Memorial Drive Preservation Association is a current recipient in round 2 of an environmental grant, not to plant elm trees, but this one is to provide utility wraps, commemorative utility wraps at 14 intersections along the drive. And so just a note that they can qualify as recipients of our funding and other funding going forward. And I think we all feel really strongly that they now have the tools to take that program to the implementation and to really get some trees in the ground at this point.
Thank you for that. I had a couple more. I was really delighted to see that King County and DNR have stepped up in part of providing this matching. And I would love to see, to the degree what those additional, it's great that money can leverage money, and to the degree there's, how these programs got expanded due to those matching funds would always be great. It certainly value added to encourage us to do more. So it's in your elevated self-interest to tell us how much our money leveraged additional funds. And I just think multiple jurisdictions also is a great thing. The thing that I also noted was that, in this item that we just had at 10A, where we were talking about those 2 little triangles, where would we plant those trees? It seems to me this is the kind of thing that would inform you're saying that around schools, for example, there's a particular dearth of trees. So, I mean, if you know, and if we have these 2 triangles, that how many ever trees are coming out, if we can plant them near schools, public spaces, you've already provided, having a plan like that affords us a very thoughtful way to go about this strategically. And I also think it's important to note that North Sea-Tac Park has been a beneficiary of this, right? I've walked it with Naomi, and in fact, because of the stewardship programs, we've actually done some invasive removal, and I think that's particularly great. And then just finally, that it seems like this is also a tool. I know that you've also enumerated like what the greenhouse gas benefits would be if the full restoration of the plan went forward by city, which I think that is also a great tool, although I'm sure there's a lot of estimations going on there. But again, in terms of guiding future work, I think that as a tool, I think that's great. And I'm just wondering whether or not this work is going to be used in our valuation of the question about preservation of the whole of North Sea-Tac Park, and want to make sure that these data are incorporated into that review. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman. Andy, I'm not sure you're in a position to speak to that particular issue. That might be for General Counsel or Steve, but
yeah.
Any comments on that?
I don't know if there's a specific question there, but I note the overlapping this of the Forterra work with the North Sea-Tac Park as we talk about that in the future going forward, Commissioner.
Right. It's just the question is like, not all trees are created equal, right? It depends on where they are, their context next to whether it be a building or the rest of a forest. And so this planning effort helped provide some of those otherwise kind of ephemeral valuations that I would hope would be part of that JAC process.
That you're looking at saying, just in general, when you're saying, yeah, it's not like all trees, but how trees, where they're located and what the impacts of them should be something we think about when we look at.
Right, when we look at replanting elsewhere, but also when we think about the relative value of North Sea-Tac Park, those trees in those places have a different value perhaps than those along Memorial Drive from an ecological or heat dome or whatever the question may be that we're looking at. So
I think
anyway,
another great reason to have Forterra as partners on this. Some folks who bring that kind of expertise to help us analyze.
Well, they've provided us with the
stewards.
roadmap to do the analysis that's now we're obligated to do for this review of North Sea-Tac Park. I just want to make sure this is used as part of that study.
Great. Commissioner Mohammed.
So this is something we're taking up at the JC, and the Sea-Tac City Council members are also looking into this. I think they have a study that's coming up around it, and so happy to share that information with you. But yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay. With that, thank you again, Andy and Jenny. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks for the presentation. At this time, commissioners, we are close to closing out the meeting here, and before we do so, I would like to give the floor to Executive Director Metric for one particular announcement.
Thanks, commissioners. I appreciate the time here at the end. Before just ending, I would like to ask Larry Eel from my staff to come up and join us in the chair up here. Not that we're going to be asking him questions, but I would like to call Larry up. I think this is a bittersweet moment, but Larry, I want to take the opportunity to recognize and acknowledge Larry's been at the port now for eight years. And I don't know, Larry, during my time, I don't think you've appeared at the commission meeting, but
this breaks my record.
But let me just say this, is that Larry was integral to all the things that get us prepared for all the commission meetings as a chief of staff. So he's performed as a chief of staff for these 8 years at the port, and he's been invaluable for that. And he's been working behind the scenes primarily, within the staff, getting the staff ready for commission meetings. But also, really, I've relied on him as really understanding what people are thinking about our internal staff and being kind of a sounding board and providing counsel for that. And especially, let me just say this for Larry, over the last 2 years under the pandemic and all the challenges that we faced, his organizational skills and his ability to really organize us in order to address those different challenges that he faces have been invaluable to me into the port. And so he's also, during that time too, when we had to reorganize, he also took on leadership of the continuous process improvement team, expert in that and continuous process improvement and lean, and also took up strategic initiatives and leading those efforts. Wherever you saw us advancing that work, that was Larry's work behind that as well. So anyway, I think bittersweet because Larry's leaving us, but I wanted to recognize him and the opportunity and just want to thank him publicly for all his contributions to the port over these last 8 years. So.
I think I'll speak on behalf of the commission in saying that we are going to miss you too, that so much of the work that we do, commission and executive leadership team, is facilitated by you, Larry, by that ability to communicate, fill the interstitial spaces between the conversations, hear what wasn't said. And so whoever gets you after this, they're really lucky. We're really going to miss you. Thank you so much for your years of public service. It was, you never wanted the spotlight, but you certainly deserve it today, the recognition. So thank you so much, Larry, for your time at the port.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Steve, for those very nice comments. Should I make a few comments?
Please do.
Since I'm breaking my streak. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Steve and also to Dave Soike. My position is at will, and both of them continued me in this role and allowed me to have this opportunity to continue to serve. So I wanted to thank them for that, and also note that both of them, Dave Soike was an interim CEO for a while, and both of them really brought just a tremendous humanity to the role and a tremendous concern for the staff at all levels, and really helped to take our culture, put our culture on a different road. I saw this great quote the other day from Sue Bird. Everybody's interviewing her about the potential end of her career, and she was asked about all these awards, amazing, huge number of awards she had, and her comment was, every kudo that I get is really a team kudo, and I really feel like
that's very appropriate for me too. You know, the work that I've done with Michelle and her team and her predecessors, and with Aaron, with Tony Van, who we created that position and hired him a little bit over 2 years ago. Just an amazing performer that has took to this work so quickly and so expertly. And so many of the kudos that I'm getting today and over the last few days are really a reflection of my team, my strategic initiatives team. Just really outstanding people. All I had to do was kind of sit back and answer a few questions once in a while, and they're off and running. Just really tremendous people. The two kudos, though, that I'm the most proud of is not a particular project. It's hearing from people across the port, particularly some frontline people, that how welcoming I was to them, be it to an ELT meeting or maybe a meeting to Steve, stopping and talking to them in the hallway, and people thanking me for that. And, you know, people sometimes fear the executive office. It can be very intimidating. And so it's always been a very high priority for me to make sure people knew that they were welcomed. There's nothing special about us executives. We just happen to have a different kind of work. Our work is no more or no less stressful than most people around the port. It's no less or more important, and I really tried to help people understand that. And so what's really been touching for me is to hear that from people and to hear the impact I've had. The last thing I want to say is, and you all know this, but the port is such an amazing place to work. And you've heard it in these presentations today, starting with the cruise presentation and ending with this last one. It's kind of appropriate that I follow the ACE and the Forterra, because that's, I think, a perfect example of the many instances where staff who have the best of intentions and their hearts are in the right place, and they're continually pushing to improve the environment or do something additional for the community to help youth get jobs, to have get some experience. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have the commissioners who are always pushing us to think up, execute on new ideas, and challenging us to take our work in places that maybe we haven't yet thought of, and asking us the what if question, and staff really rising to those occasions and figuring things out. And so it's something that maybe it's not unique to the port, but it's pretty rare. And it's been great to work for a bunch of people who are really committed to making things better for our communities and our environment. So thank you. It's been great. I'm sorry I don't have the opportunity to work with the two of you more. I've enjoyed what I've been able to work with you so far, and the three of you really have enjoyed our time together as well. Ryan, we go back a little bit further. Appreciate your efforts and support of the lean work as well in particular. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. That was really thoughtful. Okay, at this time, Executive Director, do you have any other closing comments for the good of the order?
I do not. Thank you, Commissioners, for your time today.
Commissioners, any other closing comments at the time? I actually do have one. This is other business. I would, in our study session this morning, we talked about some benchmarks that staff had put forward for the first time publicly. I would like to refer those to the Environment Committee, to the SEA Committee. And so that'll take a vote on referral in other business. So I would move we do so. Do I have a second? All right, it's been moved and seconded. I'm just going to call for a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, that has been referred to committee. And with that, we are adjourned at 2:53.
Take our work in places that maybe we haven't yet thought of, and asking us the what if question, and staff really rising to those occasions and figuring things out. And so it's something that maybe it's not unique to the port, but it's pretty rare. And it's been great to work for a bunch of people who are really committed to making things better for our communities and our environment. So thank you. It's been great. I'm sorry I don't